Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great backlash! He's done it! Oh, brilliant play! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Dini! It's a goal, forward for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
And this week our guest is Erik Samuelson. Erik is the former finance director and CEO of AFC Wimbledon, and he's also the author of the book All Together Now, The Extraordinary Story of AFC Wimbledon. Erik, thanks very much for coming on.
Pleasure, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us, Erik.
So this week we're looking at a copy of Match from the 18th of April 1988. So just looking at the cover. So John Aldridge of Liverpool's on the cover. And the headlines are exclusive semi-finals colour action. King John, Aldridge double denies Cloughie. Don's dream comes true. All in your up-to-date Football Weekly. And there's match facts and there's a Reading souvenir poster inside. So the main picture is of John Aldridge celebrating the second of his two goals against Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup semi-final of 1988. And there's a picture at the bottom of Dennis Wise stabbing home the winner for Wimbledon against Luton to send the Dons into the cup final. And we always kind of look at the other prices on the magazine. So Singapore, it's $2.60. Spain, 195 pesetas. And in era 66, that'd be 66 pence. 66 pence including VAT. And it's 45 pence match. So Erik, did you ever buy Match or Shoot or anything like that when you were a boy?
I bought it for my children.
Right.
Although, to be honest, it was a bit after that. This was my elder son would have been 8 at the time, so he was just getting into that sort of thing. So I think I was an occasional buyer. And of course, once he'd finished with it, I was allowed to flip through it. I don't particularly remember this copy, so I think I probably started buying it. This was his first season supporting Wimbledon, and in that season they won the FA Cup, which, when you're 8, you think that's normal. Yeah. I think as he realised later there's a lot of pain to come in supporting England, we moved on to reading about what actually happens in football, and he and his younger brother got into this sort of stuff.
So what about other magazines? So like Charles Buchan's before, or Goal magazine? Would you've got any of those when you were a youngster yourself?
I did, because Charles Buchan, although I was at AFC Wimbledon, I'm from Sunderland, and
right.
Charlie Buchan was a renowned Sunderland player. Mm-hmm. So Charlie Buchan's football annual was in my Christmas stocking every year. Well, not literally, not big enough for that. Along with, we previously talked about it, my copies of the Bruins and the Woolly annuals. So I particularly remember that. And it was a year also when you used to buy candy cigarettes and get players, which is why, for reasons I can't explain, I came to be a very long distance, never seen them play, Hearts supporter.
Right. And
I don't have no idea why, but from those candy cigarettes, that's where it started.
Excellent.
All right, so we go into the magazine then. So the first few pages are all about the FA Cup semi-finals of that weekend. So pages 2 and 3 is a 2-page spreads on the Liverpool-Nottingham Forest game at Hillsborough from 1988. And the headline is All the Way to Wembley. And there's a picture there of John Aldridge scoring the goal, a picture of Steve McMahon celebrating with Nigel Spackman. So it's Liverpool in the red strip, Nottingham Forest in white, black and white. Liverpool were heading for a double that season. Looked as if they were well on their way at that point.
It was a done deal, I think, in everybody's minds, that they were a frighteningly good team. And as a relatively new, because the reason we were supporting Wimbledon was my boys, although I'm from Sunderland, my boys wanted to watch a local team. So we were new to Wimbledon, and I was delighted they didn't choose Chelsea or Spurs, because as a Northerner, I would struggle to support one of the big teams. But Wimbledon was fine because they have the same tradition as Sunderland of battling against the odds and being a bit awkward and a bit difficult. So that was fine. And I was worried for my son's state of mind if we went to Wembley and lost. But as you know, that didn't happen. But I'm jumping ahead. So I think they beat Forest 2-1. I know Aldridge scored one of them. I can't honestly remember the others. But it was just inevitable. They were going to do the double, which was a relatively rare event when I was younger. I think Spurs did it in '61, and that was an earth-shaking thing to have happened. It was round about the time Liverpool were dominant, and since then it's become much more commonplace.
Yeah. So we go over the page again to look at the other semi-final. I think we're probably more interested in, Eric.
Well, just before we do, I just want, so the top left corner, John Aldridge scoring. So it shows you from a face on, facing into the crowd from the goal, and I love a crowd reaction to a goal, especially when it's the team that's just conceded the goal, because you can just, I don't know how well you can make them out, but the dejection on the faces, the flicking of the fingers and things like that. I just love that sort of lack of emotion, or emotion, but a lack of emotion sort of thing.
Yeah, I find that's captured because at the time when you're the supporting the goal scoring team, it's the last thing you look at. Well, there'll be a few who'll start pointing and waving fingers at the opposition fans, but the majority are just ecstatic and up off the ground. And it's only later you come to look at these things. It's become a bit of a, is the right word, a trope nowadays, that when they televise games like last night, they spend an awful lot of time focusing on the angst of the fans, whether they're winning or losing team. To be honest, I'd rather look at later. I want to watch the game at the time. Come back and see how miserable or ecstatic they were later.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look on the opposite page, you can see from the same view, but this time it's Spurs that have scored, and it's quite a different reaction you're getting from the crowd that time. So, it's like the ups and downs of football just shown in those two pictures there.
Yes, absolutely.
Both semi-finals were played on the same day, Saturday the 9th of April 1988. Liverpool beat Nottingham Forest 2-1 at Hillsborough in front of 51,627 fans. John Aldridge scoring twice, 12th minute with a penalty, and the 51st minute, and Nigel Clough got Forest goal in the 66th minute. So if we go to pages 4 and 5, and the headline, Don's dream comes true. So Wimbledon beat Luton Town 2-1 at White Hart Lane in front of a crowd of 25,963, and Mick Harford scored first for Luton in 48 minutes. John Fashanu equalised with a penalty on 56 minutes, and the winner came from Dennis Wise on 80 minutes. And so here on these two pages here, there's a couple of photographs of the goals.
I remember, it must be one of the lowest ever crowds for an FA Cup semi-final. Spurs, I don't know what the capacity at the time was, but I guess it was in the 40,000s.
Yeah.
And a crowd of 25,000. I went down to buy tickets for the game at Plough Lane the morning they became available. And I forget the exact details, but let's say they're on sale at 10 o'clock. I got there at 8:30, and I was about 20th in the queue. And that just isn't how it would have been at any of the really big London teams. But we got tickets. My wife and my two sons, indeed some friends, all went to White Hart Lane for that game. And I think it's worth sort of looking back on who Wimbledon were at the time. They'd only got into the Football League in 1977. And in those days, for the younger listeners, you actually got into the Football League through a voting system. You didn't win a promotion. That didn't follow for some years. And Wimbledon ran a massive campaign, a very successful campaign entitled something like Don's for Division 4. And Workington were the unlucky club to be voted out to let them in. So in 1977, and 10 years later into the First Division, then what became the Premier League, and the season after that, as we'll come to in a little while, winning the FA Cup. It's an astonishing story of a rise from, you can't say from nowhere, they were a very big non-league club, through to Wembley and winning the FA Cup and beating, I don't know, were Liverpool the best team in Europe at the time? They certainly were, if not one of the top two or three. So that's the context of this club with a tiny support that couldn't even sell out White Hart Lane, let alone Wembley, for an FA Cup semi-final against, well, Luton, who were at the time a much bigger club in many ways, but nonetheless, I suppose, not a massively supported team. No, I remember the game well. It's famous for, and I love this, the game where Bobby Gould actually drove a minivan with the players in and was stopped at the entrance because they wouldn't believe who he and they were, which I think is in a great tradition of up and at 'em and also up yours of Wimbledon and the way they behaved, which I thought, a lovely man, Bobby Gould. I met him later, and I thought that was a classic bit of, I think, stage management, really. They didn't need to do that, but they chose to, and creating a team spirit.
Yeah, it's definitely in line with the image of Wimbledon that everybody sees from the outside, isn't it? It's definitely in line with that. That's a brilliant
Absolutely.
story.
And Wimbledon, I mean, in that particular game, Mick Harford, of course, who went on to manage Wimbledon later, scored, I've forgotten the exact minute, but yes, early in the second half. But Wimbledon had missed several shots in the first half and should have been, if not out of sight, then pretty comfortable by half time. And then they won a penalty, which was I think it was a foul on, no, it was a handball. It was a handball. And Fash took a penalty that's very unfashionable nowadays. I mean, with the Euros going on right now, you've seen a whole range of penalties. The one that won the game for Italy against Spain, if you watched that one,
Yeah.
which the guy just walked up, stuttered, and then strolled the ball into the goalie's left-hand corner of the net, was the Fashanu penalty. And nowadays, I mean, that's unusual, isn't it? Nowadays, you hammer it, you just smash it as hard as you can. But Fash just walked up, strolled up, looked one way, hit it the other, and it was 1-1.
Yeah.
And then the winner came from a classic Wimbledon long throw down the line, hooked into the middle by Alan Cork, and in came, as the picture shows in match, Dennis Wise sliding in to poke it underneath the goalie's body. Struggling to remember the goalkeeper's name, but I think that was the year Luton won the Football League Cup, and that goalie saved a penalty.
So let's just have a look at the teams then. So Luton Town, goalkeepers Andy Dibble.
That's him, Andy Dibble, yeah.
Tim Breaker, Ashley Grimes, Darren McDonough, Steve Foster, Mal Donaghy, Danny Wilson, Brian Steen, Mick Harford, Mark Steen, and Rob Johnson. Quite a strong Luton team, a lot of names that are well known. Yeah, I mean, the Steen brothers were very successful. Dibble became famous for his penalty save in the league. Mick Harford was a terrifying man, both on and off the pitch, in terms of his physical presence. So yeah, and they had, but a good footballer too. I mean, not just his physicality. A lot of people, I think, underrate some of the quality of players at the time. It was a very good team, and they were a bit unlucky that day. Let's have a look at the Wimbledon teams. So Wimbledon teams: Dave Besant in goals. Number 2, John Scales, Terry Phelan, Vinnie Jones, Eric Young, Andy Thorne, Terry Gibson, Alan Cork, John Fashanu, Laurie Sanchez, and Dennis Wise, and Laurie Cunningham come on as a substitute for Terry Gibson. Yes, Laurie Cunningham of Real Madrid coming on as a substitute for Wimbledon, which strikes me as, even now, and he did the same in the final. If you look at that team, it really was the team that had got into the I'll call it the Premier League, because that's what it is now, was basically Dave Bassett, Harry Bassett's team. And he'd left the previous summer, and Bobby Gould had taken it over. And he brought in, which was his talent, he brought in people like John Scales, who also came on as a sub that day. He didn't start in the final, didn't start the final. I'm pretty sure he got Dennis Wise, who was an unused reserve team player at Southampton. I'm pretty sure he brought him in. And a couple of other, cheap and cheerful buys. The whole team cost next to nothing. Vinnie Jones had come in from Wealdstone. Dave Besant had been, I'll be slaughtered by Wimbledon fans for not knowing this, but I think it was somewhere like Enfield. Went on to play for England. Vinnie Jones went on to play for Wales. Dennis Wise went on to play for England. And although they had a reputation for being hoofball and the position of maximum opportunity approach to football, I'd get the ball in the area and let it drop, because that's your best chance of winning.
Really, there was some good footballers in that team. They're underrated. One of the ones who was the sort that you don't notice unless you're a real football addict or even a particularly thoughtful football person was Lawrie Sanchez, who went on to score the winning goal at Wembley. He, all of these players regard AFC Wimbledon as the natural successor of what happened to Wimbledon. And Lawrie came into the sportsman's dinner for us, and he talked about he scored the winning goal in the cup final. And nowadays you see players interviewed on television and they're saying they got a hat trick and say, "Oh no, it's not about my hat trick. It's not. It's about the team. It's about the 3 points." And I'm thinking, "Oh, give it a rest, will you?" And your hat trick probably won you £30,000. You love it, the fact that you're the star of the team. And Lawrie was one of those guys who was just fantastically honest. He said he scored the winner at Wembley and he didn't want anybody else to score. He wanted to be the guy who'd scored the winner, and he was just praying that, not praying, but he still played to win. But he wanted that attribute, he wanted that accolade, and years later he can carry it with him. And I thought, how wonderfully honest. I went to a sports dinner, a charity dinner, moving on sideways a bit. They had people who'd scored 100 goals in the Premier League, and they were being interviewed or challenged in part by Gary Neville. And I got the age where I forget names. The Liverpool centre-back, anyway, who's now a commentator. Anyway,
Carragher.
Yeah, and they said to Carragher, "Who did you find the most challenging?" And they said to Gary Neville, "Who did you most enjoy playing against?" And he said, in a wonderful piece of honesty, "I never enjoyed playing. I was so terrified I'd make a mistake that I never really enjoyed playing." And a year later, they had Steven Gerrard, and they asked him what he enjoyed most, and he said, "I never enjoyed the game till it was over." I think that those insights for me are much more valuable than, it's all about the team, which is just crap.
Yeah.
They've all been through the PR bit, and it's lovely to hear people talking honestly and openly. Similarly, when AFC Wimbledon got promoted into the Football League, we got the stage where there's one penalty left each, and Luton were going first. If they scored, then we needed to score our last one. If they missed, we were up. So I said to our striker, who was going to go on last, "Did you want him to miss so you didn't have the stress? Or did you want him to score?" He said, "I wanted him to score. I wanted to score the winner." And again, it's the same sort of message of, let's have some honesty in the game. Let's have people talking about what really happens. Yeah. I've moved quite a distance away from that semi-final day. But going back to the day itself, it was a deserved, if slightly fortunate win. And the next thing was, how on earth do I get cup final tickets for my family?
I think Andy Dibble was he not just brought in? He wasn't a regular for the team, was he? But I think I saw it, and he had a fantastic game. Some of the saves he made was keeping Luton in the game. Absolutely cracking saves.
He did, and he went on. And he didn't have a fantastic career, but he went on to have a very good career. Actually, the other thing that strikes me about that game is that in the previous round, Wimbledon played Watford at Plough Lane and were 1-0 down. I think I wrote this in the right order. We were 1-0 down when Brian Gale was sent off, so we're down to 10 men. And in that game, the substitute Eric Young, who came on for Brian Gale, scored the equaliser, and then Fash scored the winner. And one of the things I love about football is the small happenstances that change everything. Brian Gale never played again in the Cup that year. He missed out on an FA Cup winners' medal. Eric Young stayed in the team. He was the one who went on to play in the Cup final. And all because I hesitate to call this a Wimbledon tradition, but more in the style of how players sometimes were that year. Brian Gale had, how should I put it, left a trailing hand in the face of one of the Watford players just after they took the lead. And how people's careers had changed comprehensively by that, for the better for Eric Young, for the worse for Brian Gale. It was Eric Young who played in this game too. And I love the chance, the serendipity of football, where these things, as an England supporter, going back to, I think it was 1996, if Paul Gascoigne had worn size 9 boots instead of size 8, would have got through at the final. You missed by a whisker a slide in to score a goal. That's the great thing about football. It's a thing that causes you sometimes to lose when you shouldn't, like Liverpool against Wimbledon. And if you didn't have that, the game would be no fun. Absolutely no fun at all.
I do that quite a lot with old articles which mention potential transfers. So one of the ones I love the most was Ali McCoist. Celtic were looking at Ali McCoist, and you just think, what a difference, you know? Can you imagine But then again, if Ali McCoist had went to Celtic, you wouldn't have thought of it anything different, really. But just looking back in hindsight, and you think, wow, what if? And as you say, just little things that can change the career of people.
I remember Ali McCoist because in a lesser-known part of his career, he came and played for my hometown team.
Yeah.
And was a failure.
Yeah.
I mean, if I ever got to meet him, I'd like to ask him, what was it? Was it the rest of the team? Was it he was just too young? We found at Wimbledon that you don't take, by and large, you don't take players on first loan because they need to get the experience of playing in men's football. I know this wasn't the same for Ollie McCoist because I think he'd come from, would it be St Johnstone?
Yeah, that's right.
And but he just wasn't a success at all. And then to see the stunning career he had at Rangers, he scored pretty well a goal every other game, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
What is it? It's not. I don't know. I'd love to understand that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, another one like that jumps out to me is Tony Cascarino when he came to Celtic. He was an absolute flop when he was in England, and maybe not so much. I think he went to France as well, didn't he? And it's just like, what is it about in a particular team or in a particular league or a particular environment that you just can't shine? And it could be the players around you.
Sunderland, when you're not old enough, from the look of you two gentlemen, to remember when Sunderland won the FA Cup in 1973. In the season we won the Cup, we signed a striker called Dave Watson, who was moved to centre-half during that season and was a tower of strength in the FA Cup final. What was it in the manager that saw that he should have been a centre-back? Or what was it that, when he went on trial at Newcastle United, suggested that Alan Shearer should be put in goal and then released?
Yeah.
These are sort of the football equivalent of turning down the Beatles, aren't they?
Yeah. So we go over the page. So
before we do, Tom, can I just point out once again we are the pleasure of John Fashionu's wristband, the sweatband, and we also have an extra bonus in that we've got Steve Foster's headband on the same double spread as well. So we've got the two of those. We spoke about John Fashionu's sweatband on a previous podcast and Steve Foster's, but to have them both in the same double spread, I think it's just a treat.
A really collector's item.
So so over the page again, it's just a wee bit more detail on the game, and there's a couple of quotes down the side there. Some quotes from the games, including one from Vince Jones of Wimbledon. And when I'm looking at John Fashanu says, Luton really wound us up because they tried to hustle us out of the game. That was a big mistake.
Wimbledon were a team you could hustle out of the game. As they developed from then onwards, they actually, especially when they involved Terry Burton on the coaching staff, they played more and more football and were always underrated for that. But I mean, Fash in particular was famous for his well, let's say, be polite, his assertive approach to football. And I think famously the elbow in the face of Gary Mabbott, broke his cheekbone, fractured his eye socket. They didn't take any prisoners at all. I had John Scales, who's a lovely man, played for Wimbledon, and in that game did it in and just described what it was like to be in the team at the time, the crazy gang reputation, which Sam Hammam, the owner, used to great effect for PR marketing purposes. But John said when he first joined as a young lad from Bristol Rovers, he would go home at night in tears from the training ground because of the bullying. And they'd do things, I don't think this happened to him, but they'd do things like strip someone naked and throw them in a skip.
Yeah.
Neil Ardley, who went on to become our manager, told me about how he signed his professional contract forms and he was, 16, 17, so he's a young, fresh-faced kid come up through the academy. He walked into the ground one day, or at the training ground, looked up at Dennis Wise and Vinnie Jones, and they took exception to that and gave him a bit of a hammering. And a few days later came up to her and said, "You never said anything to anybody, guys. You're okay." You think, blimey. And this is, you just can't do that nowadays. In fact, managers complain about how soft-soaked young players have to be. But it was a brutal environment, or could be, not all the time. But it also seemed somehow to foster this incredible team spirit.
Yeah, I'd imagine in their heads, I mean, they talk about how Luton tried to noise them up. I'd imagine in their heads, as soon as they see an opposition team, that's their approach. They just think, yes, this is absolutely playing into our hands.
Yep, and I mean, Vinnie Jones was the one who had the reputation. I always personally thought a lot of his later tackles was good. Actually, just lacked that little edge of speed that would have made him a very, very good player indeed. He was a better player than people gave him credit for. But Fash was quite capable of being brutal. Dennis Wise was it him? Somebody said he could start a fight in an empty room. So they had, let's say, an edge to it.
Yeah.
And they'd been toughened up by the environment in which they brought themselves up. And in the dressing room, there was no punches pulled about if you weren't playing well. You were told, absolutely, brutally sometimes.
Yeah.
Someone once said that Joe Kinnear didn't throw teacups; he threw the tea urn. I'm sure that's apocryphal, but it gives a sense of the atmosphere at the time, I think.
So in the bottom right-hand corner of that page, we've got a wee bit about the Scottish Cup semi-final where it says Celtic surged towards the double. So Celtic had beaten Hearts in the same day. It's funny, all the semi-finals were played at the same time. In this era, both FA Cup finals were played at the same time the Saturday afternoon. The Scottish Cup semi-finals played at the same time on the Saturday.
Couldn't possibly happen now, could it?
No.
With the TV programming.
Yeah, it's funny.
One of the things when AFC Wimbledon were getting going was when they're setting the league fixtures, they ask you to pair with another team, so you don't end up having a fixture at home on the same day. And for some strange reasons, a non-league team, actually it wasn't a strange reason, we chose Chelsea because we knew a fair number of their fans would come and watch us when they weren't playing. So we paired up with them when they set the fixtures, but then it dawned on us that how often did Chelsea play at 3 o'clock on a Saturday? 3 or 4 times a season. So we paired with Brentford instead so we could share their stewards. And I think that's one of the massive changes from this era when you turn up at 3 o'clock and an evening kickoff was 7:30.
Yeah.
It would never be 8 o'clock now. People wouldn't be able to get home in time in those days, or not easily. And I think personally, I think it's for the poorer. I'd much rather be there watching the game than watching it on telly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just on the article about the Celtic Hearts game, was it? Again, it's Alex McDonald, the Hearts manager, is really scathing about Henry Smith, the goalkeeper. And you know, occasionally nowadays you will get a manager who fires into his players, but you know, it's few and far between. They normally sort of circle the wagons, but here he's just laying into them, saying, you know, he's got to take responsibility for that and go away, blah blah blah. And I just, again, you know, we touched on earlier on, and Tom and I see it all the time in the earlier magazines how honest and forthright the players and managers are when they're asked questions in these magazines.
Yeah, they're not being coached. I mean, I think probably the only one who consistently does it nowadays is Mourinho. And you probably saw the other day that England fullback Shaw was just saying, in a slightly roundabout way, what a nightmare it was for him at Manchester United. Because even when he played well, it was, what was it? Shaw's body and my brain, said Mourinho of his man of the match performance. It's about the only one who does it anymore. I think probably Alex Ferguson was known for, well, publicly though he's pretty supportive, but privately, yes, the hairdryer treatment. It's so unusual, and I partly because a lot of the power has changed from where it used to be with the managers towards the players now. It's just before England won the World Cup, and I know I'm speaking to two Scots, but just before they did, it was only 2 years before that they abolished the old retain transfer system where you couldn't go to another club. You just weren't. You were. It was known as the slavery clause. You weren't allowed to. And then you had the abolition of the maximum wage around about the same time. And then gradually, as the years have gone on, you just have to, keep the players happy with constant arm around the shoulder rather than a bit of a kicking. And secondly, their agents who can move them on almost any time they want. It's a completely different game. And for the poorer, I'm sad to say, don't mean to be too downbeat, but.
So we go over the page then? Yep. So on the left-hand side there, we've got Sunshine Ray. So this is the Davy Cooper column, and he's talking about his Rangers teammate Ray Wilkins. And I know that there are plenty of fans who reckon that at 31, Ray's best days are behind him, and that an international recall at this late stage of his career would be a backward step for England. So he's only 31 there in that picture, although he seems a lot older. And just
still had some hair. If you asked me to conjure up an image of Ray Wilkins, there wouldn't be any hair in it. He obviously played on for quite a while longer. The other thing I particularly remember about him is, wasn't he the first player ever to be sent off playing for England?
Yeah, against was it Morocco in the World Cup in '86? He threw the ball at the referee.
Yeah,
was it pretty early on as well in the game?
It was. Yes, it was. It's not an accolade you want, like being the first guy to be sent off in a FA Cup final, which wasn't him, but same sort of thing. Notoriety. It's easier to achieve notoriety than it is to achieve fame, isn't it? He certainly achieved through that. But he was a fine player.
Yeah.
I just looked at Neil Webb there as too, who was another one who had a career that was. Staccato, really. He had massive successes at some clubs and just failed at others. If I remember right, he was a great success at Forest. Didn't really make it at Man United. Is this him going on to Rangers?
So this is so Neil Webb's there because David Cooper started talking Ray Wilkins up coming out of the England squad. I think Webb would benefit from.
I didn't remember him going on to Rangers.
Wilkins' experience there, because he's talking about how Wilkins has mastered the continental game, playing with AC Milan and Paris Saint-Germain. But so saying internationally, he was done at 31. And I just had a wee look in the current England squad. Kyle Walker and Jordan Henderson are 31. They're, I guess, the kind of senior players in England. The current England squad.
It's very rare that you have a team like the kids at Manchester United that win the league from the well, you don't win anything with kids, as Alan Hansen once said, but you need a sprinkling of more experienced players. The season we won promotion to the Football League, we started with the youngest team we'd ever had, but by the end of it, we brought in a couple of older hands, because you just need that. You need the ones who, well, as they say of Wilkins in this, being there, done it, calm head under pressure. Which is exactly what you want. And Henderson in particular, I think, brings that to England. I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't start. I guess he's just still shaking off the effect of a long-term injury, isn't he?
Yeah, I think it's what they bring, obviously what they bring on the park, but off the park is just as important, to bring the experience of how you prepare for a game and how you react to certain situations off the park. So I think, that as well. I mean, Ray Wilkins was he came in brilliant for Rangers. I mean, he absolutely bossed that midfield at times. But I don't think, because did he go to Hibs straight after Rangers, or was it QPR?
I think he went to QPR after Rangers, and then he came back up to play for him, because he made his debut for Hibs at 40, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
I've missed that.
Yeah, I don't think it was a particularly successful spell for him, was it? I don't think it's...
No, you can go on. There's a player we had who's still playing at 41. He's playing in League Two now, but it is the genetic freaks are guys who can keep doing that and actually still deliver.
Yeah.
When you talk about the benefits of experience, I mean, we brought in a player in our season where we won promotion into League One from League Two in a playoff final at Wembley. We brought in a guy called Darius Charles from he'd been at Burton, who looked like he'd reached the end of his career because of injury. But we brought him in, and suddenly you have this guy in defence who he just has a physical presence on and off the pitch. And indeed, in the playoff semi-final, which went to extra time, he just, and it seems to be the vogue now, but it wasn't then, he took over the team talk before the start of extra time, being there, done that, knew what he was talking about, getting the players completely respected him, a real leader on the pitch, and indeed offered at the training ground with his habits, never late, always trained hardest, always last to leave the training ground. That sort of thing, you can't, well, you have to try and inculcate into younger players, but when you can bring it in with an experienced player, it just makes such a difference to a team. And he, in many ways, is one of the main reasons we got promoted that season. And you know, you look at Wimbledon, you had the old heads there of Alan Cork, who'd been around for years and done everything. The real experience that comes with that, it's invaluable. But we never aspired to the qualities of a Ray Wilkins in our midfield, I'm afraid.
So page 9 there, in match we've got golden goals. So it's some pictures there of in black and white. It says Matches a magazine with picture power. So it's a page of black and white photos of goals being scored. And they include John Aldridge scoring for Liverpool against Wimbledon in the league, Viv Anderson scoring for Manchester United against West Ham, and Siggy Johnson scores for Sheffield Wednesday against Norwich City.
I think that season we played Liverpool twice that season, obviously, because we're in the Premier League. I think we were the subject of an unfortunate 2-1 defeat at their place, and we got a 1-1 draw at home. But one of the reasons that I think we were comfortable playing in the FA Cup final was we didn't feel in any way intimidated. And one of the things about that season that picture reminds me of us playing Liverpool was people talk about the Wimbledon win that season as being an absolute complete shock. But I wouldn't say the team that comes sixth in the Premier League beating the team that came top is on the face of it a real shock. If you look at the players individually, yes, man for man, I don't think you'd have swapped anybody. But sixth beast first, that's not exactly a headline, is it?
Yeah. I thought Wimbledon had they not already beaten Liverpool? I thought they were undefeated that season against them.
I thought that was in our first season in the league.
Right, it might have been. But you're absolutely spot on about the fact that taken in isolation of 1 or 2 seasons, it wasn't really that much of a shock.
No, shouldn't have been. It's still characterised as one of the great shocks. Probably because Liverpool was such a fantastic team and had such a great run, both in England and in Europe.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. 6th place first. Big deal.
All right, we go over the page again then. So this is a 2-page piece headlined White Hart Strain. And what this is looking at some of the London clubs. London's Falling Down, part 2 of our spotlight on the capital crash of 3 of London's giants, as we talk to a trio at the sharp end of a season to forget. So Mitchell Thomas at Tottenham, obviously our fans are disappointed in our own lack of success and the fact that Arsenal have done so well. Paul Ince at West Ham. But Alan Dickens is one of the players who's suffered most because while he's a recognised midfielder, he's been forced to play up front, and when he hasn't done well, the crowd have jeered him and called for Frank McAvenny to come back. And they also speak to Tony Dorigo at Chelsea.
The picture that catches my attention on that page is David Pleat, who, when he was manager of Luton, I think they relegated Manchester City on the last day of the season with a goal in the 110th minute. No, I mean the 87th minute or something. They won. Yeah. They went to Man City, and I think the team that lost went down. Was how it was. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, it was Radiante scored.
And Pleat was famous for just didn't know what to do with all the energy in his body. And this famous film of him in his fawn suit and his brown shoes, kangaroo hopping across the pitch in sheer delight at that 1-0 win. And this football people have long memories, because when we went to play the playoff final, which had to be was then called the City of Manchester Stadium, I think is it the Emirates now? Anyway, whatever it's called now. We went there. We were allocated, this was to get into the Football League, we were allocated the away dressing room. And when we got there, the guy said, "You're playing Luton. Those bastards relegated us." And I still remember Pleat danced across the pitch. There is no way they're having the home dressing room. And they switched us round. And that was, 28 years later.
You got to love the pettiness of football. You really do.
and the memory, that guy, I don't know. Well, that guy insulted us 28 years ago. He didn't mean to. He just didn't know how to celebrate. Yeah. I think it was more of an insult to the style guide and fashion guide than it was to.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pettiness and the long range memories, absolutely wonderful.
I've just looked up there, Liverpool and Wimbledon's record in the league round about that time. So you were right, Eric, in the results in that 87-88 season in the league. But Wimbledon were in the first division, 86-87. So that cup winning season was their second season in the top flight.
Yes.
And Wimbledon had beaten Liverpool at Anfield in the league in March 87.
When you think about that, I mean, 11 years earlier, they were winning the Southern League, so the Premier League.
Yeah.
Astonishing story, absolutely astonishing story.
Yeah, so Nigel Winterburn and
sure we won in our first season. I don't think we won at home.
Right, I beat them at Anfield March.
Yes.
Nigel Winterburn and Alan Cork scored the goals. Kenny Dalglish scored for Liverpool.
Yeah, what an achievement! I think, which again is why I was so much happier that my boys chose Wimbledon rather than Chelsea or Spurs. I could live with that.
Okay. Right, okay, so we get anything else to say there, Andy, about any?
No, there's just some of the stats on the players. Paul Ince, 53 England caps, 2 goals, and just an interesting thing, which you sometimes forget about, that Fergie labelled him a bottler and a big-time Charlie, which was, we're talking about how managers sort of protect their players, and once again Fergie didn't hold back with his assessment of Paul Ince back then. Tony Dorigo, I sort of forgot that he's actually Australian, and he played 15 times for England, and it was simply because that he applied for British citizenship. It wasn't anything to do with family. So I think his dad was Italian or something like that, and his mum was Australian. So he basically applied for citizenship so he could play for England. So
Paul Ince was the self-styled governor, wasn't he?
Paul Ince,
he presented himself. I mean, he went on to manage that team in Milton Keynes that we generally talk about, AFC Wimbledon. And one of the things that amused us no end when we were probably in the conference about to get into Football League or in League Two, he said, well, what can you do with £3 million, which was about 4 times our annual wage budget at the time. And he was struggling to make a success in League One. And I thought, well, what a different sort of world it is that other clubs live in. So anyway, that's an aside on Mr. Ince. He was a good player, though, a very fine player.
Yeah,
I was surprised to hear that he only scored 2 goals. Only 2 goals in 59.
Yeah, this is the stats I found: 2 goals in 53 games.
Right, we go over the page then for the Trevor Francis interview. So it's an exclusive interview by Adrian Curtis. So just picking out a couple of wee things that he says. So Trevor Francis at this point is now a 33-year-old Queen's Park Rangers player. And here he warns young English players like Nigel Clough to talk to older players before moving abroad. And in the article, he criticises Ian Rush for not learning Italian. In the interview, Francis says he got things easier in Italy than Rush did, as Sampdoria had just come up from Serie B, so weren't expected to do big things, as they paid only £1 million for him, while Juventus have forked out £3 million for Rush, and they expected the title. And he suggests that an English striker of 1988 moving abroad would suffer through lack of experience of man-to-man marking due to the English clubs not having any European experience over the last few years.
There were beliefs about continental players when I'm quite a bit older than you gents, and one of the things was that they didn't like it rough. The other one was they couldn't head a ball, and their goalkeepers were prone to in the days when you could actually touch a goalkeeper and not be sent to prison for it. Their goalkeepers were very vulnerable to a good old-fashioned British challenge. So, and players going abroad were very unusual. The first one I can remember was John Charles, he was miles ahead of all the rest of them. And I think Jerry Byrne possibly went to, and then Ian Rush, who anecdotally claimed that, what was it when he went? Was it Juventus he went to? He said, anecdotally, it's claimed that he said it was like being in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And it was these were real trailblazers. The Trevor Francis's and the Karl Lineker went to Barcelona, didn't he? Although that was some years later.
Yeah.
I can understand they struggled. Nowadays, you have people there to organise your accommodation, your shopping, making sure your kids are in school, getting you language lessons. Those days, I think you're very much left to yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. In those days, whereas now you can probably employ a whole staff to sort of look after you if you're a big player going abroad. But yeah, but Francis makes the point that Ian Rush knew he was going to Juventus for over a year, but didn't learn the language, which he said was obviously the thing that kind of stopped him doing so well.
I particularly remember about Trevor Francis is he scored the winner in the European Cup final. But Brian Clough, who was another one of those ones I wasn't afraid to say what he thinks, said basically he didn't do much. He just stooped and headed the ball in. And the bloke who deserved all the credit for it was a player who I always think Brian Clough rescued from oblivion, John Robertson.
John Robertson, yeah.
Who must have been one of the best left wingers I've ever seen. Wonderful, wonderful player with a fantastic touch. And Clough had a particular talent, I think, for bringing players out of themselves. Allegedly, when he took a player on, he would say to them, "What's your problem? Women, drink, or gambling?"
Yeah.
I don't know which, if any of those applied to John Robertson, but I do know he turned him around completely. I got so much pleasure from watching that guy play.
Yeah.
Francis had a goal lead on a plate that allowed him to be the man who won a European Cup. And I was a big fan of Clough because he played for my hometown team, Sunderland. I was there the day his career was ended, and he did end his ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, which is not a nothing injury these days, but wouldn't have ended his career. And I much admired his son, who wasn't the goal scorer, but was a quality player.
Yeah.
And everybody's got a Brian Clough story, and I'm going to crowbar one in here. Because our manager, one of our managers at AFC Wimbledon, Terry Brown, he's an assistant manager, a guy called Stuart Cash, whose son now plays for Aston Villa, Matty Cash. And Stuart had the relatively rare, probably less rare nowadays, characteristic of having been signed by two European Cup winners, Brian Clough at Forest and Martin O'Neill when he was at Wycombe. Anyway, they were managers of Aldershot, and they went to watch a game against Burton Athletic, who they were due to play, Burton Albion, who they were due to play. And the manager there was Nigel Clough, and sitting in the stands, now a very old man with a blanket around his knees, was Brian Clough. Now, Stuart Cash is a very forthright man, nothing faces him. And so he said to Terry, "It's Cloughy over there." And Terry said, "We'll go and say hello. You know, he signed you, he'll remember you." "No, I can't, I really can't." "Why not?" "Well, he might not remember me." "Well, go and say hello." "No." "Why don't you go up to him and say, 'Hello, Mr. Clough. I don't know if you remember me, I'm Stuart Cash.'" "Yeah, all right, I'll do that." So he walked up the stairs, walked up to Brian Clough and said, "Hello, Mr. Clough. I'm Stuart Cash." And before he could finish, Brian Clough said, "The worst fullback I ever signed." And he came back to Terry, and Terry swears it's true and said jubilantly, "He remembered me."
Excellent.
Was it Jock Wallace that Gary Lineker played for?
Yeah, at Leicester City, yeah.
Leicester, because he told a story once about being, I'm pretty sure it's right, about being held against the wall by Jock Wallace for his failures in a game, and he claimed he'd scored a hat trick. I don't know much about Mr. Wallace's management style, but it was certainly not untypical of managers in those days, was it?
Well, I mean, I think that was just a Scottish manager style. You know, there's that.
Was it? Do you think it's a particular characteristic of Scottish managers?
Yeah, well, there was that story with Jim McLean after his Dundee United team had won 7-1 against Hamilton. He chewed them out and forced them to go jog around the park because they didn't entertain, I think, was his criticism of them. So yeah, guys like that, Jock Wallace and Jim McLean, were forever not happy. And again, there's that. Have you ever seen that bit of footage when Aberdeen won the Scottish Cup when Alex Ferguson's shouting, absolutely raging at his team because he said it was only sort of Miller and Jim Leighton, Lord Miller and McLeish that had played well that day. So never satisfied Scottish managers.
No, and made hard decisions because it was Ferguson. Was it McLean he dropped from a cup final? Not McLean. Was the goalkeeper he dropped between the
Jim Leighton?
Yeah,
Jim Leighton, between the final and the
replay. Yeah.
So I think Leighton didn't even get a medal. Must be one of the harshest things ever to happen to you.
Yeah, well, Jim Leighton's never spoke to Alex Ferguson again after that day.
And I'm with him. I sympathise with him. What a terrible thing to happen to you. But on the other hand, your job's to put the best team out you can. So
Yeah.
Hard man.
Right, we go over the page then. So where we got Tranmere's proudest day. So this is page 14-15. So this is about the Mercantile Credit League centenary, a weekend of all-day fixtures at Wembley. 20 minutes each way on the Saturday, increasing to 30 minutes on the Sunday. And this involved a number of teams to celebrate the league centenary. Tranmere, Wimbledon, Liverpool, Newcastle, Leeds, Forest, Blackburn, Villa, Everton, Wolves, Luton, Man United, Wigan, Sunderland, Crystal Palace and Sheffield Wednesday. So the attendance there was 41,500 there on the Saturday and only 17,000 there on the Sunday. Do you remember this at all, Eric?
No, I looked at this and said, I don't remember this at all. I didn't remember this at all. I didn't remember Wimbledon being there, and I didn't remember Sunderland being there, the two teams I'm associated with. And I do instantly recognise Marco Gabbiadini. I'm pretty sure that's him, this photo in the middle of the page. But no, it was bizarre competition to hold, isn't it? A bit like, seemed to me, a complete non-event like the Intertoto Cup.
Yeah.
Why did they play these games?
It was an odd thing. Andy, do you know much about it?
No.
So it was an odd, because obviously it was 20-minute games, but it was on the full-side Wembley pitch. And if you look at it, they were all pretty much low-scoring games, as you would expect for 20 minutes each way on a full-size pitch. Yeah, Tranmere Rovers made the semi-final and they lost to Nottingham Forest in penalties, but Arsenal won the tournament. I think it was a sort of largely forgettable event designed to celebrate the league centenary.
I wonder what state the pitch was at the end of the day. Very different in those days, of course, but when you watch the pictures of these old games, even as relatively recent as that, the pitches are often a complete squagmire. I don't think Wembley ever descended to that level, although it was famous for lumps of turf coming up, wasn't it? When we went to Wembley in the playoffs in 2016 as AFC Wimbledon, I always used to try and grab hold of the groundsman and just get him to explain to me how the pitch worked. And so there's a picture of me somewhere on my hands and knees with the groundsman, picking through, as if we'd lost a contact lens, picking through the glass. He's trying to identify the plastic for me that holds it all together and makes it much more viable a pitch. There's two reasons for doing that. One is natural curiosity. The second one is a bit like the groundsman at Luton who made sure we got the home dressing room. It's always a good idea to get on the right side of the staff there. But, I mean, that's I wouldn't say it's my main memory of Wembley, but it did take me back to watching the games, the early Wimbledon games when the ball would get stuck in the mud and nobody thought twice about it, did they? And without wishing to be jump into too many conclusions with this, I always assumed that the further north you went, so Sunderland had worse weather than the south of England. In Scotland, you had that problem in Trumps, I always assumed.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, so the thing I picked out most from these two pages was a photo of Marco Gabbiadini. Now, he was born in 1968, and this magazine is from 1980. He's 20 there. Yeah. And he doesn't look 20. He looks a little bit older than 20, shall we say. And maybe it's just a bad pose that he's caught him in. But, I mean...
No, that's precisely how I remember him throughout the entire of his time. He was at... Sunderland, I think Chelsea bought him, where he wasn't a success at all. I mean, he had good skills, but incredible pace. And, you pay a lot of money for that even now. The players with the ultimate pace are the ones you're after. But yeah, but otherwise, I'm to be honest, I can't think I would have been interested in going, even if I had the opportunity. It's a nothing event.
Yeah.
Dreamt up by a marketing man, I guess.
Was it 11-a-sides, Tom?
Yeah, it was 11-a-side, yeah.
Because it was just, it seems to me, it's almost like the outdoor soccer sixes.
Yeah.
But if they'd made it 6-a-sides, then that maybe would have been a bit more. But then again, why not then just have it indoors? Yeah, it's a strange. It's almost, you can imagine it's a pre-season thing.
Yeah.
Just some sort of...
It's end of season.
Yeah.
And there's still fixtures going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
Conference division. There's still at least one Division 1 game to go.
Yeah.
Best forgotten, I think, these sorts of events.
We go over the page then, Andy. This is the worldwide section. So have a look at a couple of World of Soccer compiled by Paul Stratton. Have a look at a couple of the bits here. One of the headlines is Zico to retire. Brazilian World Cup star Zico has announced he will retire in July when his contract at Flamengo comes to an end. 35-year-old veteran of 3 World Cups plans to start a new career teaching football in Japan. Says Zico, I'm getting tired of my injuries and I think the time has come to hang up my boots. I have an offer to start a soccer camp in Tokyo and I am likely to accept it. So, spoiler, Zico didn't actually retire at that point, although he did move to Tokyo and played for Kashima Antlers until 1994.
That's a good few years after this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful player.
Yeah, he was.
There was a lot of investment in Japan at the time, wasn't there? Trying to develop the country. They've still not really become a footballing nation in terms of World Cup, have they?
Yeah.
No, as yet, no.
And I never quite understood how Arsene Wenger ended up there, which seemed to be quite a perverse thing to have done. And then for Arsenal to have spotted that he was there and the qualities that he had.
Yeah.
One of the best things to come out of Japan. I think he changed football in England dramatically, well, in Europe, I think, dramatically with his approach.
So in the facing page there as well, we've got Koeman sparks cup controversy. It says Ronald Koeman. Dutch star Ronald Koeman has soured PSV Eindhoven's expected march to European Cup glory with an amazing outburst directed at his club's semi-final opponents. Holland's champions-elect have won a host of admirers this season with a brand of exciting football that has seen them score more than 100 goals in the league. As they go into next week's semi-final second leg tie against Spanish giants Real Madrid as favourites to lift the European Cup following a 1-1 draw in Spain the first leg. But star defender Koeman did PSV's image no favours at all when speaking in the Dutch magazine Sport International. He declared, against Madrid we will be using the knowledge that they have 7 players with 1 caution each while we have only 3. We will try to provoke them. But yeah, so at PSV, they drew that game 0-0 and got into the final on away goals. But I had a wee look at PSV's run to winning the European Cup that season. So they'd drawn 1-1 and 0-0 with Bordeaux in the quarter-final. And obviously they drew the 2 games with Real Madrid in the semi-final, and then they drew 0-0 with Benfica in the final, winning 6-5 in penalties. So although they won the European Cup, the last win was the 4th of November, and they only won 3 matches the entire tournament, just by being able to win in away goals and penalty kicks.
That's incredible, that, isn't it?
A fine player, wasn't it, Koeman?
He was, yeah.
Wasn't it him that Graham Teller held as responsible for losing the England job?
Yeah.
He could have been sent off for bringing down...
Was it David Platt he pulled down?
Yeah.
And then he scored a free kick a few minutes later.
And then, yes, and the worst of all the world, you then go on to add insult to injury by scoring a goal against us. It's scoring the key goal against us.
Yeah.
Although Graham Teller was never a great success as a manager. I mean, for me, the one thing he brought to English football was the kick-off routine where you lump the ball down the left wing for your big, tall striker to try and head it. Yeah. For me, that's a legacy of Graham Taylor, rather sadly.
Yeah. They mentioned the number of goals that they scored that season. So in total that season, they scored 105 goals in just 29 games. That's like 3.6 goals per game they scored that season.
Yeah. That's
outstanding. I mean,
it is.
And they also, there's a mention there of Hans Heelhuis, who went on to play for Aberdeen, who, as it says, Tigana was their best player, and what Heelhuis did was quite effective. He eliminated Tigana for the rest of the match, and he was unable to start the return. So he's basically, I mean, it's just the whole article there is about how they've been quite physical and provoking reactions and things like that. So, again, you'd probably be up for a charge, nowadays, if you come out with comments like that.
Well, yes, it's not quite, not quite in the scale of Roy Keane's famous comment about taking revenge, but you couldn't possibly say that. And he couldn't do it either. The challenges he would get away with. I haven't done the stats, but it does seem to me that, I mean, as the years have gone on, goals have become harder and harder to score because, the English goal scoring record is 60 goals in a season, I think.
Right.
And the second best was 59. So Brian Clough scored 42 in a season, I think, for Sunderland. I think he did. Because nowadays, if you get a 15-goal striker, you've hit gold, haven't you? 20 goals is the top tier, the absolute top tier.
Yeah.
Arsene Wenger was saying recently that he was the words he used, but one of the things he noticed about Premier League football, to put it politely, was it's all about defence now. And so many of the games you see, it's all about moving the ball sideways and sideways and sideways. And I must admit, I've lost a bit of my appetite for watching the game because the old up and atom style of the Wimbledons and indeed, and the aggressive tactics, assertive tactics of the Hollands of those days seem to have gone. One of the refreshing things about this Euro 20 Championship, however, is a complete reversal of the way Italy play. From the traditional days of Dow defence, win 1-0, whereas now they're playing attacking, exciting football. What a transformation, what a delight to watch.
Yeah.
I've got to be careful saying that since we're playing in the final, but it's a real pleasure to see that sort of football back at the international level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's one of the things I was just looking for some of them there, but one of the things I have brought up a few times is, but like certainly 60s, 70s, when you have the end of season and top scorers, there's a dozen or more that are over 30, 40 goals.
Yeah.
Scorers, quite easily. And then, the 80s, it was like struggling to get out of 20s. And even now, it's, anybody that gets above 30 goals, that's outstanding. So
it's in danger of wandering into old fogey territory, but I remember watching Kenneth Wolstenholme, the famous, I think it's all over there on the pitch commentator, if people don't remember him, commenting on an England game many, many years ago, probably in the 60s, and commenting with a sort of laugh in his voice how strange it was that the continental players seemed happy to pass the ball backwards rather than run the risk of losing it. I think what a different game it is since then. In those days, when you got a free kick, it was always the big set-piece event. The centre-backs would come forward and you'd be looking for the opportunity for a goal. Now, you just put it down and pass it, and off you go again. Defences have become much more assured, and tactics are much tighter, stopping people scoring. It's a less. There are fewer goals scored, and with it, I think it's therefore a less exciting game for me anyway. But then, as I said, that's probably me moving to old fogey mode.
Yeah, I asked the question, why do we think there has been a change? But I don't know that it was ever really answered. I don't know. I don't think there was any rule changes.
Organisationally and tactically, I think people have got much more sophisticated. Yeah. It's also harder to bully people now. If you go back to the early days of when goalkeepers could be barged, the sort of tackles that were allowed. I'm not saying that's a bad thing that isn't allowed now.
Yeah.
But so much have changed, and now it's so much. I remember talking to Wally Downs, who managed us for a while, and he has been a successful coach at several Premier League games, and he said, to my surprise, I'm not a big fan of a tackle. Well, I remember watching players who would, the winger would get past them and hair after them, a flying tackle, legs flying everywhere, winger turned head over heels, the ball flies into the stand. That was part of the drama of the game. Fans still love a really good crunching tackle, and yet one of the top coaches in the Premier League saying, I'm not a big fan of tackling. And that struck me particularly when I watched an England game some years ago where Stuart Pearce had a fantastic game. And then I looked at the stats, 2 tackles in 90 minutes. Stuart Pearce, wasn't exactly he wasn't a light touch player, was he? And yet it's the way they manage people, the way they manoeuvre them now. It just has made for defences so much more effective. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's taken some of the fun out of the game.
So the only thing else I was going to say before we move on, there's a picture of Glenn Hoddle there in his Monaco days, just a smart Monaco shirt he's wearing there, and that sort of diagonal red-white style that they always do.
Yep. The other thing I want to just on so it's got a bunch of the European leagues, and in Spain, Real Madrid are at the top, sort of as you'd expect, but Barcelona are in 9th place, 22 points behind, and this is when it was 2 points for a win. That is pretty much a bad season for Barcelona, eh?
Certainly is.
So we go over to mixed mailbag. So mixed mailbag in the left-hand side here. There's a couple of wee things I was going to look at. A letter from Sean Davis of Pinkhull, Staffordshire. Once again, Luton's artificial pitch has given them an unfair advantage at home in cup competitions. In the Simod Cup, Stoke and Swindon came a cropper, and in the Littlewood Cup, Bradford and Oxford both looked hopelessly lost. Luton reached the FA Cup semi-finals after overcoming Portsmouth and Southampton at home, but where would they be had all their games been on grass?
Well, yes, of course. And there was Luton and QPR, I think, were the two teams who particularly had artificial pitches. Even now, I mean, all pitches now to some all top-level pitches are to some extent artificial, because I think there's about 5 to 10% of plastic in them. But even now, I mean, against AFC Wimbledon, we drew Sutton United, who were just been promoted into the Football League, but they're in the conference. We had to go and play on that pitch, and the players absolutely hated it. It was just desperate to get the game over. The players and the managers were against it. And one of the things that happened behind the scenes was that, as I understand it, the Football Conference allowed the use of artificial pitches. And they were told that they were encouraged, possibly encouraged by the FA to do that, because the Football Leagues 1 and 2 were going to vote in favour of allowing it if people wanted to. And then come the vote at Football Leagues 1 and 2, the teams, the clubs voted tied in their vote as to whether or not to allow them. So basically the proposal hadn't passed and they weren't allowed, which left the conference stranded. So now you have teams like Sutton United playing on an artificial pitch, which is a massive money spender for them, as well as giving them, I still believe, a degree of advantage. Getting promoted in the Football League, they have to tear their pitch up because they have to play on grass. I'm sure the day will come sometime when artificial pitches are okay, but not then. And we used to train when our training pitches weren't good enough. We'd train on artificial pitches, and some of the players just somewhere between couldn't and wouldn't, because the older players where their knees were starting to go. So the FA, as I understand it, came back and leaned heavily on the Football League to adopt, at League 1 and League 2 level, to adopt artificial pitches. And I thought it was a very elegant way out of it that the Football League found. They said they'd be perfectly willing to, once the PFA and the League Managers Association were also in favour, known full well that the massive antipathy to non-league, to artificial pitches resides there. So that's where it's been left. You still have this anomaly that in the conference and up to that level you can play on artificial pitches, but beyond, absolutely not. I can't see that personally being resolved for 10, 15 years, maybe quite some time before that's going to happen. It's still a big advantage to have a home game on one of them.
And the other letter I was going to look at is from Carol Wright of Norwich. Looking back to Scotland's dire performances against the likes of Luxembourg and Saudi Arabia, surely national team boss Andy Roxburgh must get his finger out if he hopes to mount a successful World Cup qualifying campaign. Other national teams like the Russians and Romanians base their teams around the champion club side, and Scotland should do likewise by selecting Liverpool trio Alan Hansen, Steve Nicol and Gary Gillespie to form three-quarters of the defence. Team confidence spreads from an established back four. The Liverpool trio will give Scotland that and allow the rest of the team to play with purpose.
Well, where would we be without opinionated fans?
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with them, but I think all three did get their turn around about that time playing for Scotland. Andy, have you picked out anything else from any of these pages?
There is there's a letter about this T Spedding. It's Colin Kennedy Dalglish, a moaning, whinging, bad loser and all-round crybaby, which I think was just it's just poetic, isn't it? It's a beautiful phrase, but I get it. I get it a bit.
Time if you go into the radio, the dial-ins immediately after a game on a Saturday. It's I don't know. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, but it seems to me that so many people are absolutely, completely, 100% certain of their opinions. And having been a CEO in football, the one thing you know is that the players weren't trying is one of the constant cries you hear. And I've never met a footballer who didn't try. Yeah. I had a regular correspondence from a man who wrote to me telling me that Terry Brown, our manager, who got us 3 promotions in 4 years, was useless, hopeless, bound to fail. We should get rid of him. We should sack him. And the absolute certainty of people in their football opinions continues to amuse me. I really don't. I don't know where it comes from. I really don't.
It's like, what I love is how fans make an opinion based on 90 minutes of football. Absolutely. And, it's like the manager and the coaching staff train with these people all week. They see them behind closed. So whether somebody's not getting a game or somebody's getting a game, and they're like, he shouldn't play or she should be playing. It's like there's a reason that they've been selected or not selected, and that reason, we're not privy to it. So I just
saw quite a lot of that close up, and how they trained, how well they trained, whether they're absolutely completely fit, whether they fit into the style of play. As a CEO of AFC Wimbledon, I never tried to intervene in the way we played football, but my challenge was always, well, for example, if you want to sign a player, why are you talking about signing a player in that position when that doesn't fit with the 4-3-3 you told me you're going to play all season? That seems to me the right sort of challenge, not why you're not picking him because I think he's a good player. And fans are always particularly attracted, as you can see with England right now, with the player who runs at people and has a few tricks and excites them, who's not necessarily the best player in the team. And I quite like him personally, but Jack Grealish seems to me a classic example of the fans are light on him as he's an exciting player. Does he give the team what they want? I'm not sure. I was so impressed by Pep Guardiola at Man City. He dropped Aguero because he wasn't playing the way he wanted him to. Aguero, of all people, drop him. And I think that's the sort of thing that only a manager can see, and fans who write in based on their 90 minutes or even their lifetime of watching and not really fully understanding football, they'll never understand it. In the end, the manager has to pick the team that gives him what he wants, and if that means dropping Aguero, so be it.
Yeah. So there we go. Kenny Dalglish is a moaning, whinging, bad loser and all-round crybaby. There we go.
So Kenny Dalglish was a very, very fine player and a fine man.
Yeah.
Especially in the way he conducted himself after Hillsborough.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of admiration for the man.
Yeah. I think a lot of the people who I hear speaking about who know Kenny Dalglish say that he's nothing like the persona that you see. So after a match of that where he's been interviewed, he's nothing like that. He's got a really dry, quick wit and sense of humour. And that's the thing, is like you don't see. Again, it's like you see players on the park and you form your judgments on that's what they're like off the park. But, most of the time you couldn't be further from the truth. You get quiet people who go into the park and become animals. And you get people who are animals off the park who go into the park and they're really calm and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's football, isn't it?
It is. And again, having been a CEO and got to know some of the players, some of the nicest, most gentle, intelligent, thoughtful, perhaps a better word than intelligent, players you can meet off the pitch. I would not want to be within 10 yards of them on the pitch. Absolutely frightening people just because of their physical presence.
Yeah.
But one of the things it seems to me that you get at a club like AFC Wimbledon, and you don't get others, is actually get a chance to meet these people. I've not been to Spurs' new stadium, which apparently is absolutely magnificent, but the way I read it, if you pay an extra £1 zillion, you can watch the players come out through what looks like to me the equivalent of going to an aquarium, or seeing them come out through the tunnel. You come to Wimbledon and you come into the bar afterwards, as long as you can get in, the players will be up on stage, being asked questions, all sorts of potentially inappropriate questions, and there's always a couple of other players there mingling with the crowd.
Yeah.
It's a damn sight easier to do that when you're winning than when you're losing, but I think getting access to players makes it easier for fans to live with the team when they're not playing well, because they're people you know now instead of people that you can abuse from a distance with no comeback.
Yeah. I mean, Tom and I, as we've mentioned before, we're Clydebank supporters, and we have that sort of access to players as well, just because there isn't a barrier put in place, and so we develop relationships with them, and it just makes you feel closer to the club. And it's so much better being a football fan where you can have that interaction with them than somebody.
Absolutely. And I think it's better for the players too, which is perhaps the other side that's not immediately obvious. When I interviewed about 80 people for writing my book, and about 8, 10, maybe even a dozen of them were players, and talking to them, and they said, there's one in particular guy called Alan Bennett, who was a centre-back for us, who said, I get every game I turn up, I park in the car park where the fans are out drinking beer in the open air, because that's the nature of the ground we had. And you get a consistent theme from all the fans of how we are, who we are, where we've come from. And you begin to realise that what you're part of with a club like ours, and indeed a club like Clydebank, because the way you fought back against the odds, is that you're part of something special, something different. And it does make a difference to how you feel about going into training. It makes a difference to how you feel about playing. I'm not sure you become a much better player on the pitch, but you do get a better sense of, well, maybe you do, but a sense of commitment and belonging.
Yeah.
And I think you can ever get at a place where the players are kept completely away from the fans. And that's why I must now make a point to come to see Clydebank play. I've only ever been to one game in Scotland. That was East Fife
Yeah.
a few years ago. I must come and see and experience the same sort of feeling I get at Wimbledon, which is
absolutely.
Describe it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to you before, Eric. That's how sort of Clydebank fans have a bit of an affinity with AFC Wimbledon. We've watched how you've grown and how you've fought back and got back into the league proper and got your own ground back at Plough Lane again. And that's, you know, I mean, and any sort of links we could forge between Clydebank and Wimbledon, sort of Bankies fans would be delighted.
Well, I will find a way. Now that I'm retired, I will find a way to get to some of the grounds I've not been to in the Anaraki way that you do visit grounds.
Yeah.
So I'm determined to go to our away game at Lincoln this year. I've never been there, but also to come and visit some of the teams, including Clydebank's on my list now. I genuinely was unaware of the trauma you'd been through. And the fight back, which is the most important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's much the same thing as yourselves, and around about the same time as well. It was 2002.
Yes, completely in parallel, wasn't it? Same year.
Yeah, and in both cases, she'd absolutely never been allowed to harm.
Yeah, the anomaly for me, the paradox for me is that, you know, the question I always found hardest to answer was, well, given what a good time you've had, aren't you glad it actually happened now? And the answer, I think, has to be, it should never have happened. It shouldn't have been allowed to happen. But now that it has, we've made the best of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it changed my life. I went from being a partner in an accountancy firm to running. I mean, if you can't play football, to get close to it in the way that I did is the best thing not in the world. Your family is the best thing in the world, but not far off it. And to understand it, to have a manager come in. I didn't say much to him. I never used to talk to a manager after a game because the last thing they want is me moaning to him or only turning up when we'd won. On a Monday morning, I'd asked him to explain the game to me. Tell me what was happening before a game. Tell me what the tactics are. What should I be looking for? And start to understand a side of football that I never had before. These are real privileges for me, who is just a schoolboy footballer, really, and not much at it. So. And I think at Clydebank, certainly the people who are running it get that same privilege. What a delight, what a pleasure it is.
Yeah. We'll get a wee bit deeper into your time
yeah,
here.
Sorry, I've changed the subject completely.
We'll talk about
I'm looking at a picture
in a few minutes.
And remembering him and Laurie Sanchez on the screen again, and it brings me back to Wimbledon.
Yeah, so the first page 19 is the private life of Andy Thorne of Wimbledon, and just picking out a couple of answers to his questions. So a few wee digs at his teammates there. Says, who's your most famous friend outside football? Jockey Bill Noons and Alan Cork. So presumably a wee dig at Alan Cork's football ability. And he's asked, which other sportsman would you most like to be and why? Laurie Sanchez, so I could have his money. He says, who have you been mistaken for anyone? And he says, yes, Rodney of Lonely Fools and Horses. What, if anything, frightens you? My girlfriend and her mum. So, yeah, a lot of sort of cheeky answers, as was the kind of want at the time of footballers answering these kind of questionnaires. So, Andy Thorne, Eric, memories of him?
Well, he was one of the two centre-backs, along with Eric Young, the one who I mentioned earlier, got his chance against Watford. I mean, my main memory of him is that allegedly, because I wasn't as closely involved in the club at that time as I am now, that after the game, Sam Hammam, the owner's basic attitude was, blimey, look at the value of the players I've got now and how much I can sell them for. And Andy Thorne was one of the ones that he made a good profit on. He sold him to Newcastle United, if I remember right, as indeed Dave Besant. He sold him there too. He's a fine centre-back, but for me, my main memory of him, sadly, is he was seen as just a saleable asset by Sam. A very mercenary attitude to the team.
I think he's a manager. I can't remember who. He's a manager now, is he?
He has been a manager. I thought I'm in danger of getting mixed up, but I thought he was a manager at one of the non-league clubs near us, Walton. I think I'm right about that.
Yeah.
I think could be getting confused there. But he's one of those. I mean, of that team, again, drifting back to AFC Wimbledon, several of them clearly regard us as whatever continuity you consider there to be between Wimbledon FC and AFC Wimbledon. He's not one of the ones who comes, but Sanch has been, John Scales has been, John Fashanu has been occasionally, Alan Cork has been, Terry Gibson has been. So for me, my main link with them, my main getting to know them, are the ones who've been to visit us and be able to chat to them in the boardroom or in the sponsors' lounge after a game. I don't recall Andy being one of those.
Okay, we go over the page then. So this is the team group. So this is Reading Simod Cup Sensation. So the Simod Cup was like the full Members' Cup, which was a cup competition for English clubs in the lower leagues. And this is a picture of the Reading team with the trophy after they'd beaten Luton Town 4-1 on Sunday the 27th of March at Wembley in front of 61,740. So that Reading are wearing their away kit, which is, I'm not sure, Andy, what you would call that. It's an orange strip they're in with navy blue and light blue trim, with a sponsor Courage across it.
Yeah, it's a Patrick kit as well, isn't it? Yeah, it's a strange one because I was looking at the badge, because the badge looks a bit sort of plain, but not a sort of badge you would associate with Reading, and I went and looked up on it. So it was adopted in 1987 after a couple of seasons without one. Now, rumours are that it was designed by Ian Branfoot, the manager's daughter, that his daughter designed it. And it's probably the most iconic badge, given that they won the CMOD Cup and got promoted into the second division, or won the second division championship. But there's nothing really, other than it was the club colours at the time for the design. There's nothing that really says this is Reading about it. So I just thought that was a real little strange little quirk that, you know, if it is one of the most iconic, it's one that just happened, you know, out of nowhere.
It's a strange competition, this, isn't it? This is the competition for Leagues 1 and Leagues 2 now, although they weren't called that at the time, isn't it? And I think you could probably have a very good quiz question on the various names that have been given to that competition over the years. It was, when we first got into play it from League 2, it was the Johnson's Paint Trophy, or the Paint Pot as it was known. And since then, I've forgotten who its current sponsors are, because it's a competition that I think for me had been ruined by allowing there's this big thing about Premier League B teams playing in the league, and the back door to it was seen to be them getting a toehold and playing in this competition.
Yeah. And
the Football League board put forward the proposition that they should be allowed to play each season. They threw in something like £1 million, I think, the Premier League teams, in order for, I think it's 16 effectively academy teams to join in and play each year, which we opposed violently because we saw it as the thin end of the wedge to B teams. And that whole subject surfaced again not so long ago when the then FA chairman suggested that B teams was possibly one of the ways forward for football. For me, it makes it a completely irrelevant cup, and one that I've never even bothered going to watch. The only time it's worth playing in is if you get to the final at Wembley, when you make a bit of money and you have a fun day out. But not a competition I like or endorse. I really don't like it at all. But looking at the picture here, I see we've got Keith Curle playing for Reading, who went on who played for Wimbledon, I think then went to Man City, and subsequently, is he now, last time I saw him, and I don't keep completely up to date with this, I think he was manager at Carlisle. Maybe he's moved on from there.
Yeah, he's moved on from there. He lost a job at Carlisle. Can't remember who he's in charge of now. He's back in management.
In Northampton, I think, or
Oldham Athletic, I think it is. He's at.
Yeah. Oh, Oldham. Okay, yeah. Sorry. A very cultured, fine centre back.
Yeah,
a really quality player. Good player.
There's another player in there, Gary Peters, who played at Wimbledon as well, 82 to 84, and he was the club captain when they won promotion to Division 2 in 83-84. So he's in there as well.
Because I only started following Wimbledon when my boys adopted them, although I know the name, I never saw him play, sadly. But I did recognise the name when I saw it.
Yeah, and just another player I'm going to, or not player, but a coach, he's just on the far right-hand corner, Stuart Henderson, and he played with Brighton and Reading as well, so he was a Scottish player. But the other thing I've just noticed about is we're talking about the strips. So the goalkeeper top is I don't know if you noticed, but they've got the courage sponsor above the badge on the goalkeeper top, which is, you know, in the outfield strips it's a badge and then the sponsor. So yeah, that was just something that I noticed there, which is a bit unusual.
Yeah. The goalkeeper top's red, which isn't that dissimilar from the sort of orange in the outfield. Okay. All right, over to you then, Andy.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to do a focus on yourself, Erik. So I'm going to send a number of questions your way. So if you just give me your answers. Okay, full name?
John Erik Samuelson. It seems to be a northern thing to use your middle name. It's not very common down here.
Right. What's your birthplace?
Sunderland.
What was your first car?
It was a sit-up and beg Ford Popular. You need to be a certain age to recognise that. It was a particularly unroadworthy vehicle, which about 60 needed at least 2 lanes on the motorway. And it had this wonderful windscreen wiper that was vacuum driven.
Right.
So if you go uphill, it would slow to barely crawling across the screen. And if you then freewheel down the other side, it would be demented. It only had 3 forward gears. Reverse was where most cars are first.
Yeah.
I drove my dad's car all the time. The number of times I shot off backwards from traffic lights and put it in reverse. Anyway, sorry. Everybody has fond memories of their first car. Mine certainly. It cost me £30.
Right. What colour was it?
It was beigey form. It did 400 miles to the gallon of oil. It was a very old car, but I loved it dearly.
Brilliant. Okay, who's your favourite player of all time?
Well, I'd like to restrict it to ones I saw play, and I think probably Jim Baxter.
Right.
Being from Sunderland and supporting Sunderland, a team where England never picked any of our players. We had a lot of Scots players in the team, and I always felt an affinity to Scottish players and the Scotland team. And we were fortunate he came to play to us, even though he was past his best. But I saw him play for the Scottish League against the Football League at Roker Park once, in a game where Alan Gilzean also played, and Jimmy Greaves, and Neil Martin, who went on to play for Sunderland. And I remember watching him on a frosty pitch thinking, how can anybody be that good? Phenomenal player. Such a shame, a wasted talent in some ways.
Yeah, okay. Who's your favourite team?
It has to be AFC Wimbledon. If you ask me for a second team, well, as I said, I've never seen them. In Scotland, it's Hearts. And internationally, my second team is the Faroe Islands, because my great-granddad came south to Sunderland for the weather, as I say, in the 1880s. And so that's the land of my fathers. So I keep an eye on them. They don't win very often, but I keep an eye on them.
Excellent. What's the most memorable match that you've seen?
I think, well, there's probably, I'm going to cheat and say this too. There's a 1973 Cup final for Sunderland where, as a League Two team, as a championship team in the modern parlance, we beat Leeds, who are probably one of the best 3 teams in Europe. And I used to use that as a sort of standing post in my life. I got married 2 years after we won the cup, I used to say, which didn't particularly amuse my wife, but that's how I used to measure things. Also, a game Wimbledon played, we were stagnating in the Ryman League, which is, if Manchester United in League One. I guess it's League 5, 6, League 8.
Right.
We've been in our third season, and we're in a playoff final, and with 10 minutes to go, we were losing. And then in the ways of the most memorable games, those are the ones you remember best, are the ones where you're just about giving up.
Yeah.
And then you score a couple of goals, and the satisfaction of getting out of a league that was really in danger of stifling us, and the thrill. There's nothing better than a last-minute goal, as long as it's yours. There's nothing worse than a conceding one. So yeah, those two games, very different levels, very different atmospheres, but both of them hugely memorable.
You talk about thrills there. What has been your biggest thrill in your life?
Well, I think it's yet to come. I hope it is. When we're currently playing games at the new Plough Lane Stadium, but not with fans allowed. But when I hope at the beginning of August, when we play Bolton in our first ever competitive game, never mind a friendly, a competitive game with a capacity crowd, I hope, and the teams come out for that, and hopefully the crowd raises the roof.
Yeah.
That will be quite a moment when you think where we came from, when you know better than most because of your Clydebank roots. That's going to be some moment indeed.
Yeah. What's been your biggest disappointment?
I'll restrict it to football. I can't honestly. I'm really struggling with that because, the whole point about football is, as somebody once said to me, you can't have a life of eating nothing but ice cream.
Yeah.
Or put it another way, if you don't have any pain, you don't really appreciate the pleasure. So, we've had probably the relegation of Wimbledon FC from the Premier League to the Championship is probably the biggest heartache, because it caused the series of events, or was a significant part of the series of events that led to the Wimbledon FC being allowed to go to Milton Keynes. But being there on a day, I went to the game thinking we needed to match the performance of Bradford that day. Bradford were playing Liverpool, needed to win, I think, to get into Europe, to be certain of getting into Europe. And we were playing away at Southampton, and my view was we'd probably lose, but we'd still be okay because Liverpool would beat Bradford. And Bradford went and beat them, and we got relegated. And it was gut-wrenching, driving my two sons home after that, and complete silence in the car. Anybody who's at a team that's been relegated, and most football fans have, will know that feeling. It's a horrendous feeling.
Yeah. Okay, what's the best country that you visited?
My favourite country, I've tried qualified as an accountant. My wife and I saved up and we backpacked. Well, we took a bus to Kathmandu from Streatham High Road in South London. And then we backpacked across Asia. And the country I liked most, although I wouldn't feel able to go there now, was what was then called Burma. It's an amazing country. Beautiful places, beautiful temples, handsome people, many of them in the national dress, just as a way of living. That and a close second, India. But my favourite place was up in the high hills in Afghanistan, a place called Bandi Amir, which was just some massive lakes. I believe some of the highest lakes on the planet. You can't wonder how they got there, but anyway, the whole journey was a phenomenal experience. But anyway, come back to the first question. Burma, and in particular a place called Shwe Dagon, which is a temple in the middle of Rangoon. If you ever got the chance to go there and your conscience would allow you, given what it's like now, that's a place not to be missed.
I'll look that up. What's your favourite food?
Oh, I'm a very basic. To be honest, if I could have egg chips and baked beans, I'd be completely happy. I wouldn't even begin to. Well, as a friend of mine said, the trouble with the restaurants that he tends to get taken to is you get food that looks more like it should be hung on the wall than eaten. I like something plain and simple.
I'm fine with that. Miscellaneous likes, so give me two things that you like to do.
When I retired, I made it a policy that every morning before I did anything, I would read the paper from beginning to end, just to keep up, which I like to do. The other like is, he doesn't particularly like me talking about it, but my younger son has a band, and I love going and standing next to the the guy at the back, the sound engineer who manages the sound, because after all, he set it up so that he could hear perfectly. So that's the place to stand.
Excellent. So on the flip side, give me 2 things that you really can't stand.
I have, keeping it to football for now, I have a real problem with. There's so much football on. I have every sympathy for the guys, but I wrote a chapter in my book, which eventually I didn't put in, about the language that's used in football and the cliches that are rolled out by commentators. And I know it's hard for them, and it must be really difficult. You know, there's only once in a while you get they think it's all over. People on the pitch who think it's all over. Or the Barry Davis one, I think it was, look at his face, that sort of stuff. But really, the use of language like a bad day at the office, I mean, this is the game you all want to play. This is the game you love. It's the romantic game. Don't belittle it by talking about it being at the office, for God's sake. When people talk at the coalface, they've never been near a coalface. So I get very irritated by that, as must be apparent from the change of tone in my voice. Why can't they? Anyway, so that gets to me. Although I've met some commentators, and I know from talking to them how difficult it is for them to bring it to life without dropping into cliches, game of 2 halves sort of stuff. So I dislike that.
To be honest, I agree with that one enough that we can have that as both of them if you want. So
okay, because I've been very fortunate in my life. There's not a lot I don't, not a lot I dislike intensely. Okay,
what's been your favourite TV show of all time?
Depends what age you ask me. I think it's a close run thing between The West Wing and The Clangers.
Okay, that's
so it depends, as I said, what age you ask me.
Yeah.
The West Wing is wildly romanticised of what a decent American president might be able to do, and puts into stark contrast the sort of politics we've got in America and indeed in Britain right now. But that's not a subject to get into here.
Yeah, I think The West Wing's one of my favourites of all time, and it's simply because it can move you in extreme directions. It's like you can be bubbling away crying, or getting really emotional, and then the next minute you're laughing, and it's absolutely fantastic. If anybody hasn't seen The West Wing, then they really are missing out. And as you say, it's this idea that this is what could be possible, to have somebody with such a high standards and such a positive human being, things like that. But
we'd also put through the most significant trauma and conscience searching over anybody who's not watched it. A big decision about whether or not you should assassinate somebody from another country because they're so evil and malevolent. I think it was all done beautifully, with the exception of one series where I think all the American writers were on strike.
Yeah.
One series a bit below par, but it's a wonderful series.
Yeah. And
in terms of comedies, my favourite is Dinner Ladies. I love Victoria Wood. Very funny lady, and it's a beautiful piece of ensemble performance. Brilliant.
Okay, final question. Which person in the world would you most like to meet?
It's funny, really. I've met 3 prime ministers. 2 after they've been prime minister, 1 before the current one. Only one of them even made the slightest impression upon me. And when I became a partner in what's now PwC, I thought I was going to meet really famous senior people and be impressed by them. And at the end, it's the same with football. You meet them and you think, oh, they're just people. They're just people. And that was there's only 2 or 3 people I've ever met where I felt when they came into a room I ought to sit up a bit straighter.
Yeah.
And I like that as you got closer to people. So who do I want to meet? I'm not sure I would survive, but I think I'd enjoy hugely spending an hour with Frankie Boyle.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. Yeah.
Very, very funny man.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgraceful, some of the things he says. But very.
I mean, I've seen him live a few times, and I saw him live with one of my brothers and his missus, and at the end, his missus had her face was like tripping her, and he said, "What's the matter with you?" And she said, I didn't like that. I said, but you were laughing all the way through. And that's typical of it. It's like, you can't, it's sort of like, oh, That's the reaction to Frankie Boyle. It's laugh first and then sort of why I shouldn't be laughing at that. But he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, a comic genius.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, back to you.
All right, okay, Eric. So let's talk a wee bit about your book. So your book,
All right,
all together now, and it's published by Pitch Publishing, so it's available all good bookshops and online. So, and it's this story of AFC Wimbledon and your, not just your part in it, but you're certainly a character throughout the book. So, if you can start off by telling us just what made you think this is, I'm going to put this down as a book, and sort of how you started going about to get all your memories together.
I've read not a lot, but a fair number of football books and sports books generally. I really enjoy cricket too. And the one that made the biggest impression on me was a book by a player called Gary Nelson, self-described journeyman footballer who never quite made it to the Premier League, played for Brighton and then Charlton. And he described the everyday life of a professional footballer. And I thought, what an insight that gave compared to, well, it's a bit like the difference between staring at players through a glass wall and meeting them. You actually get to see what it's like to be carried off at a match with half the crowd hoping that you've broken your leg, to go into a playoff final and lose, to have all those sorts of descriptions, and the sheer mundanity of the four of you driving from Brighton to Charlton every day to train and what training's like. And I enjoyed that because it gave me insight football fans never get. And I thought, when it came to AFC Wimbledon, it's a really good story. You know, all our club ripped away and moved up the motorway. A group of fans saying we're not having that. Four in particular, sadly I wasn't one of those four, saying we're going to start again, and ending up back in the league, in League One, in the same league as the team that took our club away from us, and briefly above them, in the league above them, and in a brand new stadium that we built and belongs to us, and still all the time owned by fans. Yeah. It's a fantastic story. So I thought if I could tell that, but tell it through the eyes of someone who's been on the inside. I've read books by managers, books by players. I've never read books by somebody who was there that saw everything, the business side and the football side. So I thought, I don't know if I can write it, but who's better placed to write a real inside story than me? So I thought, well, I'm going to. I was encouraged by a couple of people I know who are professional journalists and authors, and she said, well, that's it, I'm going to do it. And made myself sit down and do it. It's quite onerous, I found.
It's an entertaining story, and you make a lot of the nuts and bolts quite entertaining, because there's periods about finance and about how you hired managers and why you sacked managers, and there's a lot of stuff that you've made quite interesting, which could be a little tedious in other hands, but it all reads really well, and it's very entertaining, and there's lovely wee stories just at that sort of lower end of football. Like I'd said to you before about how Dave Anderson got recruited in his first interview at a little chef while he was taking a breakfast stop from his job as a trucker, and he get interviewed while he was tucking into a belly buster breakfast. I just love that. I just love the sort of mundanity of that. I thought we just having to fit that into his working life kind of thing, and that was his first impression. But he still got a job.
Yeah. The thing about football is almost everybody in football is a good storyteller.
Yeah.
If you sit down and talk to them, they will tell you some really good stories. And then the trick is to try and distill it all into something that is coherent, but and keeps the fun of it. I mean, there's a story in there about a guy who, unless you've got to the very end, you want to found it, who was just desperate. Our physio was desperate to be on the pitch at Wembley, and he agreed with one of his friends, one of the players, that he'd mime a dead leg or a cramp or something so that he got on the pitch. And sure enough, after 75 minutes, this lad goes down, and Stuart, the physio, races across the pitch, and he's saying, oh, mate, that's fantastic. I got across the whole pitch. I'm on telly. I'm on the pitch at Wembley. And the player says, I'm injured. And I thought, I just loved that the child in him that wants to be on telly and get on the Wembley pitch. And then the irony of when he gets on the pitch, he's actually got to do his job because the bloke's pulled up injured. And there's lots of stories like that. That's my particular favourite, of just what happens in everyday life in football. They're interesting people and they've got stories to tell.
I was just going to... Did you keep a diary or anything like that through the years, or was this just something that you...
I had to research it. I'm very fortunate. The club had its own website for the first 10, 11, 12 years. And although it's tucked away out of sight on the internet, if you know where to look, it's still there. There's nothing secret about it. So I had every news item we'd ever published about the club from over the August after we formed. We formed in the May, June, right through at the end of our first season in the Football League. And then I have something like 9,000 emails still in my in tray, and probably 4 or 5 times as many filed. I've got all of them. I've got the minutes of all the board meetings. I've got, I just kept them on my laptop. Maybe I shouldn't have them. Copies of, when we went to a tribunal with a player that someone had signed and we couldn't agree a fee. I've got all the detail of that. I've got the interview notes, which I've just returned to the club just recently. All the CVs and interview notes and what we thought of the managers when we appointed them. I had just far too much information. And then, as I said, I interviewed 80 people.
Yeah.
All of whom had something interesting to say. And I was pleased to find that none of them told me anything completely scandalous that I was unaware of. It was my big fear. There's some sort of skeleton in the cupboard. And they're great storytellers. So the fun bit was interviewing people, because you just chat to them and they tell you things you didn't know and give of themselves more than they're meant to. The hard bit is then saying, I've got to write it now. I read about Stephen King, who gets up at 8 o'clock in the morning, writes till 1, has a coffee and lunch, then reads for 2 hours, and if he doesn't like it, he tears it all up. And that's his routine. You said I read the newspaper every morning because that's my promise. And about 10 o'clock I start, and about 1:30 it's time for a cup of tea. And then at 11 o'clock there's a test match on. And I don't have the powers of concentration of these people. It was so difficult to make myself sit down and do it. But I approached it a bit like the way I did when I gave up smoking a long time ago. I told so many people I was going to do it. I was too embarrassed not to.
Yeah.
Finally finished it 18 months after my first interview. It got published 18 months after my first interview. And that's the key point. The moment you interview somebody and say, I'm writing a book, well, you owe it to them. You have to do it then.
And have you had much feedback on it from the people involved now that it's out?
Yeah. The feedback, I try to write it for people who are, and I don't mean this in the belittling word, just football fans, not Wimbledon fans, because it's a Wimbledon story. I was trying to do what Gary Nelson did, was talk about the wider aspects of football. There's 2 in particular. John Motson rang me up. I'd met him through the club, of course. He just rang me up on Sunday and said, I absolutely loved it, loved every minute of it. It's fantastic. So he kindly allowed me to quote that. And Henry Winter, the Times football writer, tweeted about it and just said, it's a great read. And as you've said, with extraordinary level of detail, which it is. So I treasure that because, of course, your family's going to say they enjoyed it. Of course it's when somebody who's got no axe to grind other than they read it that you really value that.
Yeah, but I would absolutely recommend it, like you say, to any football fans, fans that like reading about football, because there's lots of great wee stories, lots of stuff with the nuts and bolts, and there's things like you talk about the stewarding and things like that. It's just really interesting in how things like that go wrong, and it's interesting as well how you learn, how you tell a story of how you're learning how to manage football matches and how to manage crowds and the finances and all that kind of stuff. You're telling the story of the mistakes that you made.
We had absolutely no idea what we were doing. One of the things just impressive that encouraged me to write this was when I was 11, I got sent to school in Newcastle. So I lost touch with all my friends at that age, nearly all of them. And 57 layers later, I was in the Royal Box at Wembley, standing next to the trophy being awarded. And a couple of days later, I got an email from a kid I knew when I was 11, 57 years later, saying, "Is that you?" And I met up with these kids who were in my football team at that age. And I was talking about Wimbledon, and I was talking about everyday stuff. And they were saying, "We never hear about this sort of stuff. This is really interesting." And I thought, that's what made me think back to Gary Nelson, that football fans, especially of big teams like Sunderland, all right, they're in the doldrums at the moment, they're a big team, don't get to hear this stuff. And I think it's worth knowing. I've found it fascinating. So I hoped other people would too.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll sail well, Eric.
If it doesn't, it's I used to say to the manager when we lost, nobody died. we'll all be okay.
Hey, all right. Will we get back into the magazine now?
Yeah.
So we're sort of more than halfway.
Yes, of course. Stuart McCall. All of the hairstyles in those days were brilliant, weren't they?
Yeah, so it's McCall. McCall's proud to be a Scot. I'm glad I spurned England. McCall got selected for the England under-21s and was going to play for them, but I think he was a substitute and didn't actually get on. I think I was wrongly advised at the time, explained Stuart. I had only half an hour to make up my mind, and it wasn't really enough. So he was selected, I think, for England and Scotland. It says it was a great honour to be chosen for England, but I began to regret what I'd done even before the game. I was made substitute, but never got on the pitch, and I'm glad now that I didn't. Interesting wee thing to know from this wee piece is that Jock Stein refused to select him again after he turned Scotland down. He played for England under 21s. The article says that Jock Stein imposed an exile on him. I thought that was interesting.
It's as you said. I think that's petty, but as you said earlier, there's an awful lot of pettiness in football.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Stuart McCall play. He was a fine player. He was in that mould of players, maybe slightly taller than Billy Bremner, but there was a type of midfield player who was smallish, very industrious, quality on the ball, that was at the heart of an awful lot of very successful teams. They're less visible nowadays than they used to be. But, players like, not just him, but Johnny Giles, players like that, really quality players at the heart of each midfield. And he was a particularly fine player, I think. I didn't realise until I saw this, that he'd once almost played for England. For me, he was as Scottish as you get.
Yeah, but obviously he did a decent career. Stuart McCall with Everton and Rangers and Scotland, and he absolutely gave his all every time he played.
He's a manager now, or I don't know if he still is at the moment. But the last time I saw him managing, he was managing Bradford.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's still there. But I don't think it mentions it in this article, but I read in somewhere of a different one that, they're saying that he was an unused sub. Apparently, he was told to go warm up, and he went right to the end of the pitch and basically wasted time, so he didn't get on. So he actually made a concerted effort. At that point, he'd made up his mind. Thought, I've made the mistake here. If I go on, that's it. So he actually wasted time to get on. Didn't end up getting on. Which, it's talking about Jock Stein basically spurning them, and it's like, he's been great for the teams he's been in, whether they be league teams or the national team. And just to think that we may have missed out on that, maybe back then, we wouldn't have thought it would have been that much of a miss. But, knowing what we know, then he was absolutely, a really good performer for any team that he played for.
And I in a slightly reluctant way, I quite admire that. It's, actually, I shouldn't be here. I'm going to go out of my way to make it difficult to put me on the pitch. I like that.
Yeah.
Good for him.
So do you want me to go over the page again? So Match Superstore down the left-hand side there. So this is the usual adverts for programmes and things like that. The big advert on it is a Glenn Hoddle VHS portrait of a soccer superstar filmed on location in Monte Carlo. So a picture of Glenn Hoddle in training there. It's a new video filmed in Monte Carlo. See Glenn as goal scorer, goalkeeper, pop star and family man.
I've never been into memorabilia, you can possibly just see on my shoulder there's 3 or 4 photos that I've got on my wall. One of them is the winning goal in the 73 Cup final. 2 of them are Wimbledon, a penalty save. And the other one is a famous photo of Tom Finney at Stamford Bridge, if I lean to one side. In the days when you're allowed to play in sort of 3 inches of
All
water.
right, yeah.
I don't understand why people buy shirts and hang them on their walls, and I don't know. I just don't get it. But I guess it's as close as some people can get to their favourites. Seems odd to me.
You spotted anything there, Andy, on that page there?
Nothing really on that page. I'm waiting for the next page.
Okay, so the next page is Match Chat, the column that takes you inside soccer. So this is a lot of wee sort of snippets of things going on in and around football at the time. So Andy, what have you spotted?
So the one at the top, Soccer's Smile, and this says, a group of football managers have got together to record a new record called The Worst Song Ever in a bid to raise money for sports aid. Our picture shows Brian Clough about to try and get a high note out of Dave Bassett. So I don't know, were you aware of this, Eric? Are you aware of this song?
No, I think there's probably several songs that qualify for that title anyway. No, I was completely unaware of it.
Right. So we're in for a treat then. So we're going to play it now. Before we do, there was a couple other articles on this in different magazines. So there's this one here from, I think it was a Shoot magazine. And it says, why are Brian Clough and Alex Ferguson playing Subbuteo? So it's a photograph of Brian Clough playing Subbuteo against Alex Ferguson, which is just a great moment in football for me. And then we've got the next one, which is exclusive Boss Squad souvenirs to be won, and you can see them all in the studio singing away there, and it's basically all the top managers of the time that are in there. But so I'm just about to. Hopefully this will work okay. So let's just sit back for the next 3.5 minutes and enjoy this.
Good day to you. This is the Prime Minister talking down to you. There now follows an important government announcement, so please pay attention. The record you're about to hear can seriously damage your eardrums, and one doesn't want to be an extra burden on the health service. So you have been warned.
Turn down the jukebox, put your earplugs in. This is the worst song ever, it doesn't even rhyme. With singing that is out of key and words that hardly barely even fit. Football songs really are the pits. All of the players, they have had their chance. They've sung their singles that really made you wince. Now it is the boss's turn to make you squirm and suffer. This football song is worse than any other. Oh, so sing it loud, so sing it clear. This is the worst song you'll ever hear. It's worse than Ed Huddles or Jazz and Days. It's the one thing not even Shilts could say. Red is a colour, white's a colour too. Green is a colour, another colour's blue. Have you had enough yet? Are your eardrums fit to burst? Of all the football songs, this is the worst. Oh, so sing it loud, so sing it long. This is the dreadfulest of football songs. Worse than United, worse than the Blues.
Let's face it, Saint, this song is bad news.
And there goes the half-time whistle. What an extraordinary whistle it was. Well, I wouldn't like to be in that dressing room now. Hey, that was diabolical with a capital D. In all my years associated with this game, I've never seen a display which was such a disgrace. You've let me down, you've let yourselves down, you've let the game down. Now get out there, young men, and show them what you're made of.
Move over, Springsteen, there's a new boss here.
think it's all over. It's not over yet.
Sing it loud, so sing it clear. This is the best song you'll ever hear. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
It's not over yet. It is now.
Yeah, that's terrible. No, I don't know.
Well, it is terrible, but it's quite a nice self-parody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Terrible done in a good way.
yeah. It's just the Graham Taylor was getting right into it as well. I thought he was really enjoying it. But it's something that I found years ago because through the magazines, and it was just like I can't believe this isn't known by everyone. You know, it's like.
Did you find it on YouTube?
No, you can't actually get it on YouTube. It was on a web page which then was removed. But I managed to, when I was preparing for this, I managed to find it somewhere else, and I've taken a copy of it.
So I'm gonna say to people who've always spit an image that have written it.
Yeah.
I've spotted Philip Pope in there as a sort of musical director.
Yep.
He done the music for Spitting Images songs, and there was Steve Neilan at the beginning there as Margaret Thatcher, and Chris Barry was there doing the voice of Brian.
He got him a job when she stepped down, wasn't he?
Yeah. And there was from Bucks Fizz at the end as well. Cheryl Baker was in there as well. Yeah. But it's just, can you imagine the current crop of top managers getting into a studio to do that? It just wouldn't happen. They'd be like, I'm not doing it. And I know it's for a great cause, but I'm surprised the likes of Ferguson and all that got involved. It was like, you just think they would say, nah, it's not for me. It's not for me, that.
Somebody must have had incredibly good contacts.
Yeah. But,
some people I'd not forgotten, but who slipped from my consciousness a long time ago. I mean, George Graham was in there, I think, and Billy Bingham.
Yep.
Mainly based with Northern Ireland rather than with a club.
Yeah.
As a manager.
Laurie McMenemy was in there.
Weren't they? And as I say, as taking the mick out of themselves, I thought it was well done. Actually, I wouldn't find myself singing along with it. But,
oh no, you say that. I've listened to it enough that I'm actually, before we came on, and we were that's what I was just singing away. It's catchy. It's catchy.
Well, I can't see it being played at Barrowland in November.
Right. Okay, Tom.
Moving on there, so we've got Match Man of the Month, and it's First Class Fash, and a picture there, John Fashanu going up for a header, and his Hummel boots, and the classic Wimbledon blue and yellow kit, made by Spall. So John Fashanu's top of Division 1 with an average rating of 8.33, and second is Craig Johnson of Liverpool with an 8 rating. And there's a picture of Craig Johnson there in the Liverpool grey away kit. Tough guy striker John Fashanu staked a further claim for a late England call-up as the First Division's most consistent performer during March.
I think he got 1 or 2 games for England. Maybe come on as a sub. I'm not entirely sure, but he, for me, he was never an international player. He was an incredibly effective league player, but he was never an international player. Nice that he got a cap. I think it was nice to have recognition, but I never saw him as that really. Must have been a nightmare to play against. And he used to focus on the chat as well as the play, didn't he? He used to chat up the referee, make sure he knew the names of their kids, and ask after them before the game. And that make a difference? It's difficult to know, isn't it? Very difficult to know. But it's nice when somebody takes the trouble to remember whether it affects your decisions.
Yeah. Match describe him as his no-nonsense style.
Yeah, that's a nice euphemism.
All right, we move along then. So we'll get this is the Scottish page, the Scottish scene with Robert Watts, and we've got Walker fits the bill. Celtic scoring sensation Andy Walker has revealed the secret fear that he wouldn't live up to his star billing at Parkhead. Now firmly established as a fan's favourite and knocking on the door of international recognition, the 23-year-old has been a revelation in the Celtic attack this season, with close on 30 goals to his name.
It seems a bit odd to me to have a Scottish page because it seems to me there's a fair degree of Scottish representation throughout the magazine until now. And then to squeeze it all into one page really just seems a bit weird. But the page does remind me that Wimbledon had Neil Sullivan as our goalkeeper, who was one of those not very Scottish Scotsmen. And before the games, usually sometimes when they were warming up, there was a bloke who I think it was a history teacher. Anyway, he's a local school teacher who used to solo serenade Neil with "Flower of Scotland." And Neil's a really nice guy who would sort of put his head down and sort of look away. And then we brought him back on loan from Doncaster, who was AFC Wimbledon. And sure enough, just before his first game for us, there was this guy still supporting us behind the goal, serenading him again with "Flower of Scotland." I thought it was absolutely lovely.
It wasn't a bad keeper for Scotland, to be
Good
fair.
goalkeeper. I don't quite know what his qualification was, presumably a grandparent.
Yeah. But that was what we did then. That's what Craig Brown did, just sort of dug for players, because we had Don Hutchison around about that time as well.
Yeah. I'm not knocking it, but you know, he was in every other respect an Englishman, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I remember him saying
from the South Africans, it's not exactly something that England reversed to doing, so I wouldn't.
No, I remember him saying he was supporting England when England played Scotland in the '96 Euros, and then he was playing against England for Scotland in that playoff for the Euros in '99.
Really nice guy and a very good keeper.
Who was the other player? Matt?
No,
the defender. Matt Elliott. Yeah, he was with that period as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. So match facts there. So we're going into the scores and the team lineups. Anything you've seen there, Andy? Any results there that stand out for you?
Not a result, but on the next couple of pages, I'll move on. Was the leading scorers, and there was Stuart Rimmer was top with 28 goals for Watford, and when I saw that, so this is in the first division, Stuart Rimmer on top with 20, and I thought, I don't remember Stuart Rimmer. You think if he scored 28 goals in the first division, you remember? Then it says 27 while at Chester. So it's a little bit of a red herring, and it turns out that the one goal he scored for Watford turned out to be the only goal he ever did score for Watford as well. So in fact, there was I'm just back. There was where is it? Page 30. There's a Southampton Arsenal game. Alan Shearer scores a hat trick and gets a 9-star rating for Southampton, which was of note. And just something I picked out from that, which I've actually got it written down as, and excuse my French, I've got it written down as shite note, simply because it's just something. 7 out of the 11 Southampton players' surnames begin with B or C, and it just looked really strange that 7 out of 11 their surnames were B or C, and I just thought it's worth pointing out, but it's not really that interesting.
There was a time when I think my memory is, and memory fades, that all 11 of the West Ham first team began with B or another letter. I don't know what it was in the era of Trevor Brooking.
Yeah.
In one game. The other thing that struck me about that guy with Stuart Rimmer with his one goal for Watford is there's probably a sort of a nerd's article to be written about blokes who scored only one goal.
Yeah.
There's a man who scored only one goal for AFC Wimbledon, but it was the one that won the first leg of the playoff semi-final against Accrington, but just before we got into the Football League. It was the only goal he scored in the 89th minute. He'd come on as a sub, but if you want to be remembered, blimey, what a way for your one goal. I bet there's a whole trawl of those across the leagues that somebody who's a bit more Anaraki than I am could come up with.
I think that was it John Slidden we were talking about recently, Tom, where I think he made one appearance for Celtic, and it was the Glasgow Cup or something, but it was against Rangers in the final and they won. And you think, if you're going to make that one appearance for Celtic or one appearance for Rangers, you want it to be in an all-firm final where you win. And that's it.
It could be better. It could be better, absolutely. A friend of mine's father played once, and I honestly can't remember. He did play in goal for a Scottish team. I genuinely can't remember. I'll ask him next time I see him, and they lost 7-1, I think. his own appearance in goal. It's not, well, when you're old enough, it doesn't matter anymore. I think it's not at the time.
So just be result of note there in Scotland. Morton beat Rangers 3-2 in the Premier Division that weekend. Collins, Alexander and Turner scoring for Morton. Ian Ferguson and Ian Durant scoring for Rangers. And Clydebank beat Forfar 3-2 with a Chick Charlie hat-trick. With attendance of 505.
I love the videos about, I loved them. I was much taken by them, and in particular, it reminded me of the names of footballers. I mean, what better name for a footballer than Budgie McGee? I got that right? What a great name. Yeah. There's a guy who played for Newcastle called Albert Stubbins, and if ever there was a northern name of a footballer, Budgie McGee. I treasure that. That's brilliant. He came back and got involved again, I think. Was he your manager?
Yeah, so Budgie McGee played with Clydebank in the seniors for a number of years, and he was, when we come back and we were reformed as a junior team, he took over. He was player manager the first season, and he was manager again for about 10 years. Clydebank. So he's a bona fide Clydebank legend
with a brilliant name.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're moving on now. So we're getting quite close to the end of the magazine now. So there's a Panini Football 88 competition with a Panini Football 88 sticker album there with Tottenham and Manchester United on the front page.
Yeah, my boys collected them. I'm not sure it was for that year, but probably subsequent years. It costs a fortune, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even with school swaps, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah. I'd agree with that, even now.
So over the page there, we've got Dear Emlyn on one side there. So there's some letters going into Emlyn Hughes. So the first one from Duncan Ellis, Burton-on-Trent. Why don't people at Match see sense, give you the sack, and instead employ somebody like Greavesy, who's a football fan rather than a Liverpool fan? And Emlyn replies, because Duncan, whoever wrote this column, be it Jimmy Greaves, George Best or Dennis Law, would have to be a Liverpool fan by the way they have played this season. Oh, and by the way, thanks for the vote of confidence.
Yeah. And it will always be the same ghostwriter anyway, won't it?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. A person who used to work for me told me they once worked for one of the Red Tops newspapers, Sunday papers, and that there would be, someone would say to them, where did you go on holiday? And they'd say, I don't know, Mallorca. And the next thing they'd be on the problem page would be, I was on holiday in Mallorca recently, and they'd put in a couple of snippets of what she'd said is the problem. And I don't believe the vast majority of this sort of stuff is the A is a ghostwriter, and B, the majority of the letters are probably similarly ghostwritten. And stuff.
And when we think to pick out from the hot gossip column there, so reporter Ray Ryan's weekly roundup of all the big transfers and the latest rumours. There's a wee bit there that says, on the subject of Tottenham, and manager Terry Venables has been checking on the progress of Brighton hotshot Gary Nelson. The 27-year-old striker has been a minor sensation in the third division this season, and despite the Seagulls repeatedly turning down offers for Nelson, Venables could pay enough to bring him to North London as a replacement for Clive Allen, who looks set to move abroad at the end of the season.
Well, if that was today, I don't know how things were in those days. It nicely harks back to what I was saying about Gary Nelson earlier. But if that was today, that would be his agent had planted that there. We had one player in particular who was with us 5 or 6 years, I think, and every time he came up towards the end of his contract, we'd be reading in the Evening Standard that Charlton were watching him or Brentford were watching him, and it was his agent just putting those stories in. So whenever I read those things nowadays, I just think, well, I wonder where that story came from. The chances of it being true pretty low, but it fills the pages.
You spotted anything there, Andy, on that page?
No, you picked out the best one for me, which was the Emlyn Hughes getting told off for being rubbish.
And the facing page is just next week. It's just previewing what's going to be in next week, and it was a Littlewoods Cup final special with Arsenal and Luton team groups. And there's a picture of Mark Lawrenson there, the Mark Lawrenson interview, him his big tash there in the Liverpool Crown Pates shirt. And over on the last page of the magazine is a picture of Lee Dixon of Arsenal, now better known as a commentator. Or
The man of the moment, eh? Yeah, he's been taking a lot of criticism, and that's just from me.
Yeah.
Well, I went onto Twitter last night. Just I don't have a. You couldn't identify me on Twitter because I only really go on to follow 2 or 3 people. But there's a lot of it's the point I was making earlier about how difficult it is to commentate on a game, and yeah, they were being slaughtered, weren't they? Him and Max, is it Max?
Dan Matterface.
Dan Matterface. They were being slaughtered.
Yeah, for my money, there was a point where they just gave up commentating and just became fans with microphones.
Yeah, which I can sort of understand really, but in many ways, especially at the end, it'd have been better just letting the camera switch on the crowd singing "It's Coming Home" and just that's all you needed to do really. You didn't need the standard phrases that they feel obliged. Well, it's so difficult for them to think of something to say. So yeah, they were just fans, and I wouldn't knock them for that.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke to Paul Mitchell, who's a Scottish commentator here, and all the time we talk about being quiet and being silent. You don't always have to say something when you're a commentator or commentator. The best ones know when just to shut up and let the action speak for itself. And I think there's too many who do think if they're silenced, they're not doing their job.
I was noticing last night. To my surprise, I'm not particularly engaged in it. I was watching with my family, and I was the quiet one in the corner, just watching it as a game. Wanting England to win, but not fanatical about it.
So for the record, this for when this goes out, we're the day after the England having beaten Denmark. So just in case England win it, and we think that we're talking about the final, this is about the semi-final.
It's absolutely.
Yeah. Just back to the photograph. Something again I've just noticed is the pinstripes on the shorts. Yeah, which is very unusual. I mean, it looks okay because they aren't that distinctive, they aren't that obvious, but I think they look okay. But the thing, with Lee Dixon, I like Lee Dixon, but I just think he's not had a great competition.
He's a better pundit than co-commentator, and I think it's a different skill. So back in the studio, I think he adds a fair bit of value. Not all of them do.
Yeah.
But the point I was going to make is the commentators need to tell you that the last 7 semi-finals have ended up in 1-0 wins scored with a winner scored by someone's left foot with a sliced shot from the edge of the area, whatever.
Yeah.
They particularly, I always found it patronising when we were on television at AFC Wimbledon, and they'd come around and they'd say, "What our players are part-time. What do your players do?" And you'll hear it in the cup commentary when there's the hope of a giant killing. Oh, the milkman is pounding down the wing or whatever. And I think it's such crap.
Yeah.
And I was asked before one of the games what our players did, and I said, Brian Clough used to talk about the local nothing team as Nottingham Pork Butchers. Our manager used to call them rag-arse Rangers. And I said, we're not rag-arse Rangers. I'm not going to tell you what they do. I just think you're patronising the players and you're patronising us. We are as professional as we can be, and we would rather you treated us like that. I don't know, probably upsetting, but I don't care what they do. What I care is what they do on the pitch.
Yeah,
and they're just filling in space. It's anyway. Again, the rantings of an old fogey.
Oh, we're all ranting about that. Just on the background, so the photograph, we think that's Niall Quinn in the background.
Okay.
For Arsenal.
A fine player. One of those ones who was always astonishing for the quality of his skill on the ground, given what you assume he is from the size and shape of him.
Yeah.
And I think if he wasn't the first, he's one of the very first who gave away most of all of his testimonial money.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sunderland, and I'm sure the press. Well, whether you can believe what you read in the press or not, I don't know. But allegedly, it was a significant getting on for £1 million. Ended up being given to a good cause. That's a decent man for you. I know he'll have made a good life out of football, but even then, a lot of them were just to pocketed it.
Yeah.
So, good for him. Good man.
A charity partner this season is the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share. This is a charitable organisation that provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: a school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community in supporting individuals and families, and we will be looking to support them in any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, and support in the form of volunteers. We will also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit from the group are aware of these vital services. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share.co.uk for the website, and that's West Dunbartonshire with an N. You can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shoot the breeze, one word. Also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts at shoottb_podcast and at Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our charity partner. We'd like to say a special thank you to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of the story of the blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. We'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support on the podcast. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank.
All right, so that's at the end of the magazine. So over to you, Andy.
Okay. What's happening with yourself at the moment, Eric? What else are you working on? Anything else? What are you doing with your spare time?
Although I retired from the CEO role just over 2 years ago, I continued as the chair of the charity, the AFC Wimbledon Foundation, which is normally independent. I mean, you can't really be independent because you're using the club's name and you're closely linked to it. But I stayed on doing that, and I retired from that last Monday, just a few days ago, because there's a new energy about the place that's come with the stadium opening, and with a renewed number and involvement of volunteers as a consequence of the pandemic. An awful lot of those volunteers are Wimbledon fans, so they've created something called the Dons Local Action Group. Basically, in a very shorthand, unfair way of describing, they're basically providing food packages to people who are struggling in the pandemic. And those people have effectively been absorbed into the charity. So here we are with a brand new ground, opening to fans properly for the first time next month. A huge amount of energy from people who have got involved with the club indirectly through this Dons Local Action Group. And a new energy because towards the end of building the stadium, we looked like we wouldn't have enough money. And again, a bunch of fans got together. So it feels to me just like it did in 2002. A lot of that energy has come back, and I'm not the right person, I concluded, to oversee and facilitate the implementation of that energy into the community. So I've stopped doing that. And my role now is I made a conscious decision to stay away from the club. The last thing they want is the former chief executive in the back row of the stand with his arms full, muttering it was better in my time. So if they ask me questions, I answer them, but I don't offer opinions. And I've got a list of things I want to do. I'm going to 4 or 5 of my boys' gigs. I've got, I wouldn't call it a bucket list of things I want to do. And go and watch some football in other places, to which Clydebank has been recently added to it.
Yeah, Tom and I will take care of you when you come up for that.
I'm serious about that. I will let you know when I'm coming. I'm trying to persuade my wife to come, but she's in the process of having 3 of her 4 major joints renewed, 2 hips and a knee, not all at one time. So I'm not sure she'd come, but if she did, then yeah, I'd love to. And we have one of my boys' godfathers lives just west of Glasgow, so it's an excuse to come to Scotland anyway.
Right, okay.
Yeah, good. So where can people find your book? Where can we get your book from?
Just put my name spelled with a K, E-R-I-K, into any major bookseller. Let me phrase this carefully. I prefer the ones who are subject to reasonable rates of UK corporation tax.
Yeah, good show.
But you should, if you're willing to buy it, you should buy it from wherever you are. I think online is the way to buy nowadays.
Yeah. If you go to Pitch Publishing, they've got a list of the different places you can buy it from.
It's been a really interesting experience writing a book and seeing, like I got on the inside of the football business, like I've got a little bit on the inside of the music business through proximity, to the inside of seeing how books get published and how it works. It's been very interesting. That's the only one I'm ever going to write, though. There's nothing else I know, anything I knew enough about to write about. I describe myself as not an author, but someone who wrote a book. So there's quite a big difference between the two. And it's easy. It's easier to write what I wrote than to write a novel, where you've got to invent the characters and locations and the action. I just wrote down what happened.
Okay. Listen, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I wish you the best with the book, with the new season, and your wife. I wish you the best of health and hopefully a quick recovery in that. And yeah, absolutely brilliant having you on. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yep.
No, I've enjoyed it. I thank you for the time.
But yeah, listen again. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Tom for being Tom.
Thank you, Andy.
And thanks to everyone who is listening to the podcast. Subscribe, share it. You can actually listen on YouTube now as well. We're starting to share more video clips from the show. So follow us on YouTube, subscribe there. Subscribe using your favourite podcast tool, application, whatever. Go to the website and support our charity partner. And just enjoy it and give us some feedback. Until the next time. Let's shoot the breeze.